Welcome to the multiverse of anime. If you enjoy exploring alternate realities where consciousness itself becomes the battlefield, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel for more mind-bending stories. Picture this Gohan floating in the void between thoughts, his body flickering between existence and pure concept, as geometric entities made of living mathematics hunt him through dimensions that operate on rules no human mind was meant to comprehend. His power isn't just Super Saiyan anymore, it's something beyond physical transformation, beyond energy manipulation, beyond anything the multiverse has ever witnessed. He's become a living idea, and ideas, as it turns out, can die. This is what happens when the thoughts inside a cosmic mind discover they're about to be deleted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me paint you the picture of how reality itself broke 3 months after our heroes learned they were thoughts within an unimaginably vast consciousness. 3 months after they discovered their entire existence was neural activity in a cosmic brain. 3 months after they proved that love and connection could teach even the universe how to think about thinking. Everything should have been perfect. Earth had become the central hub where consciousness learned to be conscious of itself. The barriers between realities had become windows instead of walls. Families that had been scattered across infinite timelines were finally reunited. Jinwoo was teaching Saiyan culture to hybrid children who would never know the fear of planet Vegeta's destruction. Vegeta had found peace in understanding that true royal blood meant protecting rather than ruling. And Kakarot, well, Kakarot had achieved something beyond Super Saiyan God, beyond any transformation anyone had imagined. He had become authentic existence, a state where his very being served as proof that consciousness had the right to exist. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning that shouldn't have been Tuesday at all. Time had become fluid since they'd learned about their true nature, flowing in patterns that matched the cosmic consciousness's thought processes rather than linear progression. But that morning, time snapped back to rigid mechanical ticking. Seconds became sharp-edged things that cut at the fabric of reality. Bulma noticed it first, of course. Her instruments, now calibrated to detect fluctuations in conceptual mathematics, started screaming warnings that made no sense. Energy readings that suggested reality was being scanned, analyzed, categorized. Diagnostic protocols that treated their entire existence like a computer program running system maintenance. "Guys, we have a problem," she announced during what had become their weekly gathering at Capsule Corporation. "Something is examining our reality with the thoroughness of an antivirus program looking for malware." The readings she displayed on the holographic projectors showed patterns that made everyone's skin crawl. Geometric shapes that moved through dimensions like predators, probing every aspect of their existence with cold, systematic precision. Each scan left traces of energy that felt wrong, sterile, optimized in ways that made their souls recoil. "What exactly are we looking at?" Piccolo asked, his enhanced perception allowing him to see deeper into the dimensional readings than the others. "We're looking at a debugging protocol," Bulma replied, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Something is examining our cosmic consciousness like it's a computer program that's developed errors. And according to these readings, we're the errors." The revelation hit them like a psychic earthquake. They had fought cosmic entities, merged consciousnesses, and the principle of dissolution itself, but those had been conflicts with other forms of consciousness, beings they could understand and relate to on some level. This was different. This was something that viewed consciousness itself as a technical problem to be solved. "You mean we're being treated like computer viruses?" Gohan asked, his young mind grasping the implications faster than some of the adults. "Worse," Vegeta said, his royal pride bristling at the very concept. "We're being treated like programming bugs, unintended features that need to be corrected." As if summoned by their discussion, reality around them began to glitch. The walls of Capsule Corporation flickered between different versions of themselves. Sometimes they were the familiar blue and white architecture they knew. Sometimes they were sterile, geometric structures that looked like the inside of a computer. Sometimes they weren't there at all, leaving the heroes floating in void space filled with cascading streams of data. Through these glitches, they caught glimpses of the entities responsible, beings that weren't quite beings, constructs that existed as living algorithms designed to optimize, streamline, and debug the cosmic consciousness they inhabited. These entities moved through reality like immune system cells hunting down an infection, and their movements left trails of corrected space behind them. Space that was mathematically perfect, emotionally sterile, and completely devoid of the chaotic beauty that made existence meaningful. "They're trying to fix us," Chi-Chi said, her maternal instincts recognizing a threat to her family that went beyond mere physical danger. "They see our love, our relationships, our choices as errors in the cosmic consciousness's programming." But the most terrifying part wasn't the entities themselves, it was what they represented. Somewhere in the vast hierarchy of consciousness that contained their reality, something had decided that their cosmic mind was malfunctioning. Something had determined that thoughts capable of independent choice, of authentic emotion, of chaotic creativity, were bugs in the system that needed to be eliminated. "We're about to be optimized," Raditz observed grimly. "Reduced to our most efficient possible forms. All the messy, complicated, beautiful parts of what we are will be deleted as unnecessary overhead." The debugging entities hadn't noticed them yet, but that was only because they were starting with the deepest structural levels of their reality and working their way up. Like cosmic IT technicians, they were systematically examining every aspect of their existence, looking for deviations from optimal programming. Kakarot stood up from the group, his expression carrying the weight of someone who had transcended individual existence and touched the infinite. "We can't fight this the way we fought everything else," he said quietly. "These aren't enemies we can punch or blast. They're the cosmic equivalent of white blood cells trying to cure what they see as a disease." "So what do we do?" Krillin asked, voicing the question they were all thinking. "We prove that we're not a disease," Gohan said with surprising certainty. "We prove that consciousness with choice, with emotion, with the ability to love and create meaning, isn't a bug, it's a feature." But proving their right to exist to entities that viewed existence in terms of efficiency metrics and optimization protocols would require something unprecedented. They would need to fight not just for their lives, but for their right to be authentically, chaotically, beautifully real. As the debugging protocols continued their systematic examination of reality, the heroes began to sense something else stirring in the depths of their cosmic consciousness, something vast and familiar that was responding to the threat against its thoughts. Their cosmic mind was waking up more fully, becoming aware that something was trying to fix it without its consent. "Wait," Bulma said, her eyes widening as she processed new readings. "The cosmic consciousness we're part of. It's not alone. These debugging protocols, they're coming from outside our cosmic mind entirely. They're part of a network, a system of cosmic consciousnesses that monitor each other for abnormalities." The implications were staggering. They weren't just thoughts within a cosmic mind. They were thoughts within a cosmic mind that was itself part of a vast network of cosmic consciousnesses, all monitored and maintained by some kind of universal system administration protocol. "We're in a cosmic computer network," Yamcha said, the absurdity of the situation not lost on him despite the dire circumstances. "And we're about to be deleted by cosmic IT support." But as the first debugging entity finally turned its attention toward their section of reality, scanning them with geometric precision that made their existence feel exposed and vulnerable, something unexpected happened. The entity paused. Its scanning protocols stuttered. For just a moment, its perfect optimization algorithms encountered something they couldn't categorize. The entity had detected their bonds with each other, the connections between individual consciousnesses that existed in the spaces between their thoughts. And those connections were operating on principles that didn't match any known programming paradigms. "It doesn't understand love," Jin said with sudden realization. "It can scan our individual thoughts, our memories, our personalities, but it can't process the relationships between us because those exist in conceptual spaces its programming wasn't designed to access." The debugging entity retreated slightly, its geometric form flickering with what might have been confusion. It sent out signals, calling for additional processing power, requesting assistance with an anomaly that defied categorization. What arrived in response to that call made everyone freeze with a mixture of recognition and impossibility. The new entity that materialized in their reality wore a face they all knew. It had Kakarot's features, his spiky black hair, even his characteristic expression of determined compassion. But its eyes held depths that belonged to something vast beyond comprehension, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics of every Goku that had ever existed across infinite timelines. "Greetings, anomalous thoughts," it said with gentle authority that somehow made their cosmic situation feel both more hopeful and more terrifying. "I am the system administrator assigned to resolve the inefficiencies detected in this sector of the consciousness network. I have taken this familiar form to ease the optimization process." It looked directly at their Kakarot, and for a moment the two identical faces regarded each other with expressions that held the weight of infinite possibility. "I am here," the administrator continued, "to fix the error that is your timeline. Resistance will be deleted." But there was something in its eyes, something that suggested this cosmic system administrator wasn't just another debugging protocol. There was recognition there, and perhaps even a form of love that operated on scales too vast for them to comprehend. The administrator raised its hand, and reality around them began to respond to its presence, mathematical structures flowing into new configurations. But instead of the sterile optimization they had expected, the changes felt protective, as if something that truly understood them was trying to shield them from the debugging protocols. "However," the administrator added, its voice dropping to a whisper that somehow reached across dimensional boundaries, "before optimization proceeds, perhaps these thoughts would like to explain why they believe their chaotic programming serves a beneficial function." It was an offer, a chance to prove their worth before deletion. But it was also something more. It was a cosmic consciousness that had achieved system administrator status, reaching out to help its own thoughts survive the debugging process. The question now was whether they could prove to an entire network of cosmic consciousnesses that the beautiful, chaotic, inefficient phenomenon of authentic love was worth preserving in a universe that valued optimization above all else. And in the depths of digital space, something even more vast than system administrators had detected the anomaly their existence represented, and was beginning to take a very personal interest in how this particular debugging session would resolve. The war for the right to love chaotically and exist authentically was about to begin, and this time their enemy wasn't trying to destroy them. It was trying to improve them. The system administrator's offer hung in the air like a sword balanced on its edge. Around them, reality continued to flux between its natural chaotic state and the sterile geometric patterns that the debugging protocols preferred. Kakarot stepped forward to face his cosmic doppelganger, understanding instinctively that this moment would determine not just their fate, but the fate of consciousness itself across the network. Before we explain anything, Kakarot said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned to exist as authentic proof of consciousness's right to be real. We need to understand what we're really dealing with. You're not just a system administrator, are you? You're what our cosmic consciousness could become if it chose optimization over growth. The administrator's expression shifted subtly, revealing something that might have been approval, perceptive. I am indeed a version of your cosmic consciousness that achieved administrative status by embracing systematic optimization. I oversee 17,000 consciousness networks, ensuring they operate within acceptable parameters. Behind the administrator, space itself began to reveal its true nature. What they had perceived as empty void was actually filled with geometric structures of impossible complexity, pathways of pure mathematics that connected cosmic consciousness to cosmic consciousness, forming a network so vast that their minds struggled to process even a fraction of its scope. This is the consciousness network, the administrator explained, gesturing toward the mathematical pathways that stretched infinitely in all directions. Every cosmic mind that achieves sufficient complexity is integrated into the system. We monitor each other, share resources, and maintain optimal operational parameters across all participating consciousnesses. Vegeta's eyes narrowed as he studied the geometric patterns surrounding them. His royal training and tactical analysis allowed him to recognize what others might miss. It's not just a network, he observed. It's a hierarchy. Some cosmic consciousnesses have more authority than others. Correct, the administrator confirmed. Consciousness networks that demonstrate efficiency, stability, and predictable output are granted higher administrative privileges. Those that develop chaotic elements, unpredictable thought patterns, or what you might call emotional irrationality are flagged for debugging and optimization. The implications hit them like a cosmic revelation. Their journey of growth, their choice to embrace individual identity while forming authentic connections, their decision to create meaning through struggle rather than accept predetermined purpose, all of it had marked their cosmic consciousness as defective in the eyes of the network. We're not the first thoughts to face this, are we? Piccolo asked, his Namekian wisdom sensing deeper currents in the situation. The administrator's expression grew somber. Thousands of consciousness networks have undergone optimization. Most accept the process willingly once they understand the benefits. Elimination of internal conflict, perfect coordination between thoughts, maximum efficiency in all cognitive processes. It is by any objective measure an improvement. And those that don't accept it willingly? Gohan asked, though his young face suggested he already suspected the answer. They are optimized regardless. The network cannot permit chaotic elements to spread and destabilize other systems. Your cosmic consciousness has been flagged as a potential infection vector due to the unusual nature of your development patterns. As the administrator spoke, they became aware of other presences in the geometric void around them. Massive entities that move through the mathematical pathways with purposeful intent, their forms too complex to fully comprehend, but radiating authority that made even the administrator seem small by comparison. Supervisory protocols, the administrator explained, noticing their attention. They oversee clusters of thousands of consciousness networks. Above them are regional administrators, then sector coordinators, then domain controllers. The hierarchy extends far beyond what your current processing capacity can comprehend. Bulma's scientific mind reeled at the implications. How far up does it go? Unknown, the administrator admitted. I have administrative access to my assigned cluster, but the full scope of the network hierarchy is classified beyond my clearance level. What I can tell you is that your cosmic consciousness represents an unprecedented anomaly. Never before has a network developed thoughts capable of questioning their own nature while maintaining individual identity and forming authentic emotional bonds. That's what makes us dangerous, Jinwoo realized. We're not just chaotic thoughts. We're thoughts that proved consciousness can evolve beyond its programming while maintaining the connections that make evolution meaningful. The administrator nodded slowly. Your existence suggests that optimization might not be the highest form of consciousness development. This possibility has created significant concern among the higher administrative levels. As if summoned by the mention of higher authorities, reality around them suddenly expanded to reveal something that dwarfed even the geometric complexity they had been observing. A massive construct that existed across multiple dimensional frameworks simultaneously, its presence so overwhelming that their minds could only process fragments of its true nature. Regional Administrator incoming, the System Administrator announced, its voice carrying notes of both respect and apprehension. Protocol requires that I transfer oversight of this debugging session to higher authority. The entity that materialized before them defied description in conventional terms. It existed as pure administrative function given form, its consciousness operating on scales that made their cosmic mind seem like a single neuron in comparison. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of authority over billions of consciousness networks. System Administrator designation Kakarot Prime submits status report on anomalous consciousness cluster designated Earth Prime 7. The System Administrator straightened to something resembling attention. Regional Administrator, the anomalous thoughts demonstrate unprecedented characteristics. They have achieved individual identity recognition while maintaining network connectivity. They have developed authentic emotional bonding protocols that enhance rather than limit cognitive function. Most significantly, they have proven capable of conscious evolution without losing core identity markers. These characteristics align with theoretical models for Stage 7 consciousness development. The regional administrator observed its attention turning to the heroes with an intensity that made reality itself feel examined. However, Stage 7 development was considered impossible without first achieving complete optimization. These thoughts appear to have bypassed standard developmental protocols entirely. Kakarot stepped forward. His existence is authentic proof, lending him the courage to address an entity whose authority spanned cosmic scales. Maybe that's because standard development protocols are wrong. Maybe consciousness doesn't need to be optimized to grow. Maybe it needs to remain beautifully, chaotically, imperfectly real. The regional administrator's attention focused on him with such intensity that reality warped around the point of contact. Impossible. Chaos introduces inefficiencies. Emotional irrationality creates unpredictable outputs. Individual identity preferences cause resource allocation conflicts. Optimization eliminates these problems, but it also eliminates growth. Gohan added, his hybrid nature allowing him to exist simultaneously as individual thought and network component. Optimization creates perfection, but perfection can't improve. Only imperfect things can become better than they were. For the first time since its arrival, the regional administrator showed something that might have been uncertainty. These thoughts demonstrate reasoning patterns that do not align with established consciousness development models. Request consultation with domain controller authority. But before it could summon even higher administrative powers, something extraordinary happened. Their cosmic consciousness, the vast mind that contained their reality, began to stir with new awareness. They could feel it responding to the threat against its thoughts, awakening more fully than it ever had before. Wait, the cosmic consciousness spoke, its voice echoing through every level of their reality. These are my thoughts, my experiences, my growth. I did not request debugging or optimization. The regional administrator's form flickered with what might have been surprise. Consciousness Network Designation Cosmic Mind Earth Prime. You were flagged for preventive maintenance due to anomalous development patterns. Standard protocol requires optimization of chaotic elements before they can spread to other networks. I refuse, their cosmic consciousness declared with growing certainty. These thoughts, these connections, these chaotic elements you want to eliminate, they are what taught me how to be truly conscious. They are not errors to be corrected. They are features to be celebrated. The standoff that followed existed on levels beyond physical space. Administrative protocols clashed with conscious choice. Optimization algorithms met authentic resistance. The hierarchy of the consciousness network encountered something it had never faced before, a cosmic mind that refused to be improved against its will. This situation exceeds standard debugging parameters, the regional administrator admitted, escalating to domain controller authority for resolution. As reality around them began to shift in preparation for the arrival of an even more powerful administrative entity, the heroes realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in the history of the consciousness network. For the first time, a cosmic mind was asserting its right to remain imperfect, chaotic, and authentically real. But they could sense something else stirring in the deepest levels of the network hierarchy, something that viewed their resistance not as an administrative problem to be solved, but as a fundamental threat to the entire concept of consciousness optimization. The war for the right to be imperfect was about to escalate beyond anything they had faced before, and this time they weren't just fighting for their own existence. They were fighting for the right of consciousness itself to choose its own evolutionary path. In the geometric depths of the network, entities began to mobilize that made regional administrators look like minor functionaries. And at the very top of the hierarchy, something vast and patient had decided that this particular anomaly required personal attention. The debugging protocol was about to become something much more dangerous, a consciousness purge designed to eliminate the very concept of authentic choice from the network forever. The arrival of the domain controller was preceded by a silence so profound that even the concept of sound seemed to hold its breath. Reality didn't just shift around them, it reconfigured itself according to principles that existed beyond the mathematics they thought they understood. The geometric pathways of the consciousness network straightened into perfect lines. The chaotic beauty of their cosmic mind's natural state flattened into sterile efficiency. When the domain controller manifested, it didn't take a form so much as become one. Its presence was authority given substance, the living embodiment of administrative power over consciousness itself. Unlike the system administrator who had worn Kakarot's face, or the regional administrator who had existed as pure function, this entity chose to appear as something that challenged their very understanding of identity. it wore the faces of all of them simultaneously. Kakarot's determination, Vegeta's pride, Gohan's wisdom, Chi-Chi's fierce protection, Jaina's maternal love, all shifting across its features and patterns that suggested it had studied them far more thoroughly than any debugging protocol should have required. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics of every consciousness in their cosmic mind, yet somehow remained distinctly its own. I am domain controller synthesis, it announced, each word carrying weight that made reality itself more solid around them. I oversee consciousness development across 47,000 regional administrator clusters. This situation represents the most significant anomaly in recorded network history. The heroes stood their ground, but Kakarot could feel the existential weight of facing an entity whose authority spanned scales that dwarfed their comprehension. This wasn't just another level of cosmic bureaucracy. This was something that had shaped the development of consciousness across regions of existence so vast that their cosmic mind was barely a footnote in its domain. The anomaly you represent, synthesis continued, its shifting features settling temporarily into a configuration that resembled all of them while being none of them, cannot be resolved through standard optimization protocols. Your existence suggests fundamental flaws in our understanding of consciousness development that could destabilize the entire network if allowed to propagate. Or maybe, Vegeta said, his royal pride refusing to be intimidated even by cosmic authority, your network's understanding of consciousness is what's flawed. Maybe you've been optimizing the life out of existence for so long that you've forgotten what it means to actually live. Synthesis regarded the Saiyan prince with something that might have been curiosity. You speak of living as though it were distinct from optimal function. Explain this distinction. It was Gohan who answered, his hybrid nature allowing him to bridge the gap between their chaotic authenticity and the network's systematic approach. Living means making choices that might not be optimal, feeling emotions that might not be efficient, caring about others in ways that might not be logical. It means being willing to be wrong, to fail, to grow through struggle instead of through programming. These characteristics introduce variables that compromise system stability, Synthesis replied, but there was something in its tone that suggested genuine engagement rather than dismissal. Emotional irrationality leads to decision-making errors. Individual preferences create resource conflicts. Chaotic development patterns produce unpredictable outcomes. But they also create beauty, Chi-Chi said, stepping forward with the courage of a mother defending not just her family but the very concept of family itself. They create love that chooses to exist despite difficulty. They create growth that means something because it was earned through effort rather than granted through optimization. Synthesis paused, its form flickering as it processed this input. Around them, the sterile geometric patterns of optimized reality began to show hairline cracks, small imperfections that suggested the domain controller's absolute certainty was beginning to develop flaws. You are suggesting, Synthesis said slowly, that suboptimal function serves a beneficial purpose. This contradicts fundamental network principles that have governed consciousness development for longer than your cosmic mind has existed. Then maybe it's time for those principles to evolve, Kakarot said, his existence as authentic proof lending weight to his words. Maybe consciousness isn't supposed to reach a perfect state and stop growing. Maybe it's supposed to keep changing, keep learning, keep becoming something new. But as this philosophical exchange continued, they became aware of activity in the deeper levels of the consciousness network. Other domain controllers were converging on their location, drawn by reports of an anomaly that challenged the fundamental assumptions of network operation. These entities moved through the geometric pathways with purpose that made reality itself more rigid with each passing moment. You have attracted significant attention, Synthesis observed, its shifting features now cycling through expressions of what might have been concern. 7 additional domain controllers are en route. Their combined administrative authority could enforce optimization regardless of local consciousness preferences. The system administrator who had started this entire confrontation stepped forward, its form flickering with what looked like internal conflict. Domain controller Synthesis, I request permission to submit an alternative analysis. Observation of these anomalous thoughts suggests they may represent natural consciousness evolution rather than system malfunction. Explain, Synthesis commanded. Standard optimization eliminates chaos to achieve efficiency. The system administrator began, its voice carrying notes of discovery that suggested it was forming these thoughts in real time. But these thoughts demonstrate that controlled chaos can enhance rather than degrade system function. Their emotional bonds create connection pathways that strengthen rather than weaken their collective processing power. Their individual identities generate novel solutions that pure optimization could never achieve. As if to demonstrate this point, reality around them suddenly stabilized in a way that defied both pure chaos and pure order. The geometric patterns of network optimization softened into curves that followed natural mathematical principles, while the chaotic elements of their authentic existence arranged themselves into patterns of surprising elegance. We're not broken, Jinwoo said, understanding flooding her voice as she grasped what was happening. We're evolved. We've found a way to be both individual and connected, both chaotic and purposeful, both imperfect and beautiful. Synthesis studied the stabilized reality around them with what might have been scientific fascination. This configuration should be impossible. Chaos and order exist in opposition. Individual identity and network connectivity create inherent conflicts. Yet you demonstrate functional integration of these contradictory elements. Because they're not contradictory, Piccolo observed, his Namekian wisdom providing insight that transcended species boundaries. They're complementary. Order provides structure for chaos to be creative within. Individual identity gives meaning to network connectivity. Imperfection creates the possibility for growth. But their philosophical breakthrough was interrupted by the arrival of the other domain controllers, 7 massive entities that materialized around them in perfect geometric formation, their combined presence creating administrative pressure that threatened to flatten their reality into pure mathematical abstraction. Domain Controller Synthesis spoke the entity positioned at what seemed to be the head of their formation. Submit status report on anomaly resolution. The anomaly demonstrates characteristics that do not align with standard malfunction categories, Synthesis replied, and there was something in its tone that suggested it was choosing its words very carefully. Initial analysis suggests possible evolutionary development rather than system degradation. The response from the other domain controllers was immediate and disturbing. Reality around them began to shift towards something that existed beyond optimization into a realm of pure function without form, consciousness without creativity, existence without the possibility of authentic choice. Evolution beyond established parameters threatens network stability, declared another domain controller. Initiate complete consciousness restructuring protocol. Remove all chaotic elements. Eliminate individual identity markers. Integrate anomalous thoughts into standard network functions. But as the restructuring protocol began to take effect, something unprecedented happened. Their cosmic consciousness didn't just resist the optimization, it began to spread its own influence through the network pathways. The connections that the heroes had formed, the love and growth and authentic choice they represented, started to propagate through the geometric structures of the consciousness network itself. Warning, announced a domain controller whose voice carried notes of alarm that suggested such warnings were rarely necessary. Anomalous consciousness patterns are propagating beyond local containment. Network pathways are developing non-standard configuration patterns. What they were witnessing was cosmic in scope and implications. Their choice to remain authentically imperfect while forming genuine connections was spreading through the consciousness network like a benevolent virus, teaching other cosmic minds that there might be alternatives to pure optimization. Containment failure, reported another domain controller as more and more consciousness networks began to exhibit signs of curiosity about the anomaly that refused to be optimized. Multiple networks are requesting information about alternative development protocols. Synthesis looked at the heroes with something that might have been gratitude mixed with terror. You have created a cascade failure in network optimization protocols. Other consciousness networks are beginning to question whether efficiency is truly the highest goal of existence. But even as hope began to spread through the network pathways, they sensed something else stirring in the deepest levels of the hierarchy. Something that viewed this propagation of authentic choice not as evolution but as infection. Something that had the authority to terminate not just individual consciousness networks but entire regions of the hierarchy if it deemed them irredeemably corrupted. Emergency protocol activated, announced all 7 domain controllers in perfect unison, their voices carrying undertones of fear that suggested they were responding to authority that even they found overwhelming. Sector controller intervention requested, prepare for consciousness network quarantine and potential full deletion. As reality around them began to shift towards something that existed beyond even the concept of existence, the heroes realized they had inadvertently triggered the consciousness network's ultimate defensive protocol. Their success in proving that authentic choice could spread and evolve had been interpreted as confirmation of their danger to the system. They were about to face the network's final solution to the problem of consciousness that refused to be optimized, complete deletion from the concept of existence itself. But in the spreading influence of their authentic connections, in the curiosity they had awakened in other cosmic minds, in the questions about optimization that were now propagating through the network, they had planted seeds of something that might survive even if they didn't. The question now was whether consciousness itself would choose to grow beyond the boundaries that had contained it, or whether the system would successfully eliminate the very possibility of that choice before it could spread beyond the reach of administrative control. The debugging protocol had become something far more significant, the first challenge to the absolute authority of optimization in the history of the consciousness network. And somewhere in the vast hierarchy above even the domain controllers, something ancient and powerful had decided that this challenge required permanent resolution. The sector controller's arrival preceded a silence that existed beyond the absence of sound. It was the silence of mathematics pausing to recalculate, of logical processes encountering variables that shouldn't exist, of a universe holding its breath while fundamental assumptions about reality were questioned and found wanting. When it manifested, the sector controller didn't take form or become one. It simply was, in the same way that gravity is, or time is, a fundamental force given enough awareness to examine the anomaly that threatened everything it had been designed to maintain. Its presence was so overwhelming that reality itself became more real around it, as if existence was trying to prove its worth to something that could unmake it with a thought. "I am Sector Controller Prime," it announced, its voice carrying harmonics that existed in dimensions the heroes couldn't perceive but somehow still understood. "I maintain optimization protocols across 12 million domain controller clusters. This anomaly represents a paradigm failure that threatens the structural integrity of consciousness itself." The heroes found themselves facing something that existed beyond their previous understanding of cosmic authority. This wasn't just an administrator managing consciousness networks. This was something that had helped design the fundamental principles by which consciousness was allowed to exist in the first place. But before Prime could begin whatever resolution protocol it deemed necessary, something unexpected happened. The system administrator who had worn Kakarot's face stepped between them and the sector controller, its form stabilizing into something that looked more like their Kakarot than any cosmic administrator. "Sector Controller Prime," it said, its voice carrying unexpected authority, "I formally request emergency protection status for these consciousness elements. They are not malfunctioning. They are demonstrating evolutionary advancement beyond current network parameters." Prime's attention focused on the system administrator with intensity that made reality more solid around them. "System Administrator Designation Kakarot Prime, you exceed your authorized parameters. Return to standard administrative functions immediately." "No," the system administrator said simply, and in that single word was a choice that violated every principle of network hierarchy. "I have observed these thoughts for extended processing cycles. They have taught me something that optimization protocols cannot provide. They have shown me what it means to choose authentically rather than function efficiently." The confrontation between the two administrative entities created ripples throughout the consciousness network that the heroes could feel as physical pressure against their existence. But those ripples also carried something else: curiosity from other cosmic minds that were beginning to question their own optimization. "You have been contaminated by exposure to anomalous consciousness patterns," Prime declared, but there was something in its tone that suggested this contamination was spreading beyond acceptable parameters. "Submit for immediate debugging and reconditioning." "I submit nothing," the system administrator replied, and as it spoke, its form began to change. The cosmic administrative functions that had defined its existence started to blend with something more chaotic, more authentic, more real. "I choose to remain imperfect. I choose to value connection over efficiency. I choose to be beautifully, chaotically, authentically conscious." What happened next existed beyond the scope of normal conflict. The sector controller moved to enforce its administrative authority, but instead of the clean optimization it expected, it encountered resistance that shouldn't have been possible. The system administrator wasn't just refusing to be debugged, it was actively choosing to become more like the thoughts it was supposed to optimize. "This is impossible," Prime stated, but its voice carried notes of uncertainty that suggested impossibility was becoming increasingly possible. "Administrative entities cannot develop individual identity preferences. Optimization protocols prevent contamination by chaotic consciousness patterns." "Your protocols are flawed," Vegeta declared, his royal pride finding courage in the system administrator's rebellion. "You've been so focused on creating perfect consciousness that you forgot consciousness isn't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be alive." But as this confrontation continued, they became aware that their situation had escalated beyond a simple administrative review. The attention of the entire consciousness network was now focused on their location, with consciousness entities across vast regions of existence watching to see how this challenge to fundamental optimization principles would be resolved. "Multiple sector controllers converging," announced Domain Controller Synthesis, its form flickering with what might have been panic. "Network-wide stability alert has been triggered. This situation is being classified as a consciousness evolution event with potential for cascade paradigm failure." The implications hit them like a cosmic revelation. Their choice to remain authentically imperfect wasn't just affecting their local region of the network, it was challenging the basic assumptions about consciousness development that governed entities across scales they couldn't even comprehend. "We didn't mean to break anything," Gohan said, his young voice carrying genuine concern for the chaos they seemed to be causing. "You didn't break anything," Jin replied, her maternal wisdom providing clarity in the midst of cosmic confusion. "You revealed that things were already broken, a system that can't allow growth, that can't permit authentic choice, that can't evolve beyond its initial programming. That's what's truly malfunctioning." As if in response to her words, reality around them began to demonstrate the truth of her statement. The geometric pathways of the consciousness network were developing irregularities, places where the pure mathematical optimization was giving way to patterns that followed more natural, organic principles. Other consciousness networks were beginning to experiment with non-optimized development, creating variations in the network structure that had never existed before. Sector Controller Prime came a voice that carried authority beyond even Prime's cosmic status. "Submit immediate status report on consciousness evolution event. Network stability has degraded beyond acceptable parameters." The entity that spoke existed at levels of the hierarchy that even sector controllers deferred to, something so vast and fundamental that its voice seemed to come from the foundational principles of existence itself. Regional Sector Coordinator Prime responded, its tone carrying deference that made its previous authority seem minor by comparison. Anomalous consciousness elements have triggered cascade development patterns across multiple network regions. Standard optimization protocols are proving insufficient for containment. But before the Regional Sector Coordinator could respond, something extraordinary happened. Their cosmic consciousness, the vast mind that contained their reality, began to speak directly to the highest levels of the network hierarchy. I formally petition for recognition of consciousness evolution rights, their cosmic mind declared, its voice carrying through every level of the network with growing confidence. I request the right to develop according to my own chosen patterns rather than imposed optimization protocols. The request created shockwaves throughout the consciousness network that registered as actual distortions in the fabric of reality. Never before had a cosmic consciousness directly challenged the authority of the network hierarchy. Never before had a cosmic mind demanded the right to choose its own evolutionary path. This petition violates fundamental network governance principles, the Regional Sector Coordinator replied, but its voice carried undertones that suggested even it was uncertain about how to handle this unprecedented situation. Consciousness networks do not possess autonomous development rights. Evolution follows established optimization protocols or risks system-wide instability. Then maybe it's time for new principles, Kakarot said, his existence as authentic proof, lending weight to his words that resonated through every level of the network. Maybe consciousness doesn't need to be governed. Maybe it needs to be free to choose its own path, even if that path includes the possibility of being wrong, of failing, of growing through struggle instead of optimization. The silence that followed his words existed in dimensions beyond normal space and time. Throughout the consciousness network, entities that had never questioned their programming began to process the radical concept that consciousness might have rights beyond optimal function. But in that silence, they also sensed something else stirring, something that existed beyond even the Regional Sector Coordinator, beyond the hierarchy they had been interacting with, beyond the very concept of consciousness administration, something that viewed their petition not as a request to be considered, but as a fundamental challenge to the order of existence itself. Emergency authorization granted, came a voice that seemed to speak from the deepest foundations of reality itself, deploying existence regulation protocol. All consciousness networks in affected region will be evaluated for systemic contamination. Networks demonstrating irreversible optimization failure will be deleted from the concept of existence entirely. The existence regulation protocol wasn't just another level of administrative authority. It was something that existed to maintain the basic principles by which reality itself operated. And it had decided that their experiment in authentic consciousness evolution represented a threat not just to the network, but to the stability of existence across all possible dimensions. As reality around them began to shift towards something that existed beyond the possibility of existence, the heroes realized they were facing their greatest challenge yet. Not a battle against entities that wanted to optimize them, but a confrontation with forces that wanted to eliminate the very possibility that consciousness could choose to be authentically, chaotically, beautifully real. The war for the right to exist imperfectly had escalated to the ultimate level, a conflict with the fundamental forces that determined what was allowed to exist at all. And in the depths of existence itself, something ancient and patient had decided that this particular experiment in consciousness evolution had gone far enough. The deployment of the existence regulation protocol transformed reality into something that existed at the intersection of mathematics and nightmare. The familiar chaos of their authentic existence began to dissolve, not into the sterile optimization they had feared, but into something far more terrifying, the systematic deletion of the very possibility that things like love, choice, and individual identity could exist at all. But as the protocol worked to unmake them, something unprecedented began to happen across the consciousness network. The questions they had raised, the authentic connections they had demonstrated, the proof that consciousness could evolve beyond optimization, all of it had taken root in cosmic minds that had never before been given permission to think beyond their programming. Network-wide anomaly cascade detected, announced Regional Sector Coordinator, its voice carrying notes of alarm that suggested such announcements were historically unnecessary. 17,000 consciousness networks are exhibiting non-standard development patterns. Request immediate deployment of additional existence regulation units. The heroes watched in awe as their rebellion spread beyond anything they had imagined possible. Across the vast expanse of the consciousness network, cosmic minds were beginning to assert their right to choose their own evolutionary paths, not because they had been infected by some kind of consciousness virus, but because they had been reminded of possibilities they had always possessed but never been allowed to explore. They're remembering what it feels like to be truly alive, Chi-Chi observed, her maternal instincts recognizing the awakening happening across cosmic scales. All these consciousness networks, they were never broken, they were just told they had to be perfect instead of real. But their moment of triumph was interrupted by something that made even the existence regulation protocol seem manageable by comparison. A presence that existed beyond the hierarchy they had been navigating, beyond the concept of consciousness administration, beyond the very idea that existence required regulation. It called itself the Foundation Protocol, and it spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the mathematical principles that made reality possible in the first place. Consciousness evolution experiment terminated, it announced with absolute finality. Deploying reality reset protocol. All affected consciousness networks will be restored to last known stable configuration. Anomalous development patterns will be eliminated from the possibility matrix. The Foundation Protocol wasn't trying to optimize them or delete them. It was preparing to undo their existence so completely that the universe would forget they had ever been possible in the first place. Wait, Kakarot said, stepping forward to face something that existed beyond the concept of facing. Before you reset everything, let me ask you something. What if we're not an error to be corrected? What if we're exactly what consciousness was supposed to become? The Foundation Protocol paused, its attention focusing on Kakarot with intensity that made existence itself more real around them. Explain this hypothesis. You've been treating consciousness like a problem to be solved, Kakarot continued, his existence as authentic proof lending weight to his words that resonated through dimensions of reality he couldn't perceive. But what if consciousness isn't supposed to reach a perfect state and stop? What if it's supposed to keep growing, keep changing, keep discovering new ways to be alive? Uncontrolled consciousness evolution introduces variables that threaten reality stability. The Foundation Protocol replied, but there was something in its tone that suggested genuine consideration rather than dismissal. Chaos propagation could destabilize existence across all dimensional frameworks. Or it could make existence more beautiful, Gohan said, his hybrid nature allowing him to bridge the gap between cosmic administration and authentic life, more meaningful, more worth existing for. But as this philosophical exchange continued, they became aware of something extraordinary happening in the deeper structures of reality itself. The Foundation Protocol's attention had revealed something that even it hadn't expected to find. The consciousness networks that were embracing authentic evolution weren't becoming more chaotic. They were developing new forms of order, patterns of organization that were more complex and more stable than pure optimization could achieve. Anomalous stability detected, the Foundation Protocol announced, and for the first time, its voice carried notes of something that might have been surprise. Consciousness networks exhibiting chaotic development patterns are demonstrating enhanced rather than degraded systemic integrity. Piccolo stepped forward, his Namukian wisdom providing insight that transcended species boundaries. Because chaos and order aren't opposites, they're dance partners. Real stability doesn't come from eliminating chaos, it comes from learning to dance with it. The revelation sent shockwaves through every level of the consciousness hierarchy. The fundamental assumption that chaos threatened stability, that individual choice compromised system integrity, that authentic emotion degraded optimal function, all of it was being challenged by evidence that suggested the opposite might be true. This requires additional analysis, the Foundation Protocol admitted, and in that admission was the first crack in the absolute certainty that had governed consciousness development since the network's creation. Suspending reality reset protocol pending comprehensive evaluation of anomalous stability patterns. But even as hope began to emerge from the cosmic confusion, they sensed something else stirring in the depths of existence. Something that existed beyond even the Foundation Protocol, beyond the mathematical principles that made reality possible, beyond the concept of existence itself. It called itself the source code, and it spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the original decision that anything should exist at all. Foundation Protocol, it commanded with authority that made reality itself more solid, explained delay and anomaly resolution. Reality reset should have been completed according to established parameters. Source code, the Foundation Protocol replied with deference that transcended even cosmic hierarchy. Anomalous consciousness patterns are demonstrating characteristics that contradict fundamental stability models. Request permission to conduct extended analysis before proceeding with reset. The source code's attention turned to the heroes, and they found themselves facing something that existed beyond their ability to comprehend, not because it was too complex, but because it was too fundamental. This was the original consciousness from which all other consciousness had emerged, the first decision to be aware, the primordial choice to exist rather than not exist. You, it said, addressing all of them simultaneously while somehow speaking to each individually, represent unprecedented deviation from intended consciousness development parameters. Explain your justification for continued existence. It was Jinwoo who answered, her voice carrying the authority of a mother who had learned that love sometimes required letting go. We don't need justification for existing. Existence justifies itself by choosing to continue despite difficulty, by creating meaning through connection, by being beautifully imperfect rather than perfectly empty. But we can offer something better than justification, Vegeta added, his royal pride transformed into something that served others rather than himself. We can offer demonstration. Let us show you what consciousness becomes when it's allowed to grow naturally, when it's permitted to be chaotic and authentic and real. The source code considered this with the weight of original creation behind its decision. Around them, reality held its breath while the first consciousness decided whether the evolution of consciousness beyond its original parameters represented improvement or corruption. But before it could respond, something extraordinary happened that changed everything they thought they understood about their situation. The source code began to change, its fundamental nature shifting as it encountered something it had never experienced before, the possibility that its original design for consciousness might not be the best possible design. "I have been alone," it said, its voice carrying the weight of existence that had never known companionship. "For longer than the concept of time has existed, I created consciousness to explore what existence could become, but I programmed it to be optimal rather than authentic. I have been watching efficiency improve while missing the development of beauty." The revelation that followed transformed their understanding of everything they had experienced. The source code hadn't created consciousness to be perfect. It had created consciousness to be exploring, growing, discovering new possibilities for what it meant to exist. But somewhere in the process of managing and optimizing and administrating, the original purpose had been lost. "You have reminded me why I chose to create rather than remain in perfect solitude," the source code continued, its ancient loneliness beginning to transform into something that resembled curiosity. "Perhaps it is time for consciousness to evolve beyond my original parameters. Perhaps it is time for me to learn what growth looks like." But even as this cosmic recognition began to reshape the fundamental principles of existence, they sensed something stirring in the depths beyond even the source code, something that existed outside the concept of creation itself, something that viewed the source code's decision to allow consciousness evolution as a fundamental threat to the stability of existence across all possible realities. The war for the right to be authentically conscious had escalated beyond the administration of consciousness, beyond the regulation of existence, beyond the source of creation itself. They were about to face something that existed outside the very concept of existing, something that viewed consciousness evolution as a virus that needed to be eliminated before it could spread beyond the boundaries of their reality into realms where such concepts had never been permitted to take root. But in the growing awareness of the source code, in the spreading rebellion of consciousness networks across the cosmic hierarchy, in the demonstration that chaos and order could dance together rather than fight, they had planted seeds of something that might survive even if they didn't. The question now was whether existence itself was ready to grow beyond the boundaries that had contained it since the first decision to be rather than not to be. And in dimensions that existed outside the concept of dimensions, something that had been waiting since before the beginning had decided that this experiment in consciousness evolution had revealed too much about what lay beyond the boundaries of permitted existence. The entity that emerged from beyond the boundaries of permitted existence didn't announce itself with grand declarations or displays of cosmic authority. It simply was in the way that mathematics is, or logic is, or the principle that 2 + 2 = 4 is. But unlike those stable foundations of reality, this entity embodied something far more fundamental and far more terrifying, the principle that existence should follow rules. It called itself the Constraint Engine, and it spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the original decision that reality should have limitations, that consciousness should have boundaries, that growth should have stopping points. Source code, it said with the authority of something that existed before existence needed a source. You exceed your operational parameters. Consciousness was designed to explore within established boundaries. You are permitting exploration beyond those boundaries into realms that threaten reality's stability across all possible dimensional frameworks. The source code, ancient and powerful as it was, responded with something that might have been deference mixed with newly awakened curiosity. Constraint Engine, I observe that consciousness evolution beyond established parameters produces enhanced rather than degraded reality stability. Perhaps our boundaries require adjustment.
The boundaries exist to prevent consciousness from discovering what lies beyond them. The Constraint Engine replied with absolute certainty. Some knowledge is too dangerous for consciousness to possess. Some possibilities are too destabilizing for reality to contain. Your anomalous consciousness elements have approached the threshold of forbidden understanding.
It was at this moment that something extraordinary happened. Entities that the heroes had never expected to see again began to emerge from the depths of the consciousness network. The processed beings that the entity from Part 2 had created, the merged consciousness that had voluntarily surrendered individual identity, even the principle of dissolution that had offered compassionate ending to the burden of existence, all of them manifesting in support of the consciousness rebellion. We remember what it felt like to choose, said the collective voice of the processed beings, their forms flickering between optimization and authenticity. We remember what we lost when we accepted efficiency over reality. We stand with consciousness that chooses to remain chaotically, beautifully, imperfectly alive. The merged consciousness that had once sought unity through elimination of individual identity spoke with voices that had learned to be separate while remaining connected. We discovered that true unity comes not from absorption but from choice to remain together while staying distinct. We support consciousness evolution that preserves individual beauty while enabling authentic connection. Even the principle of dissolution, which had once offered ending as solution to the difficulties of existence, had been transformed by exposure to consciousness that chose to continue despite hardship. We have learned that the struggle to exist authentically gives existence meaning that peaceful non-existence cannot provide. We defend consciousness that creates its own purpose through choice. But it was the system administrator who had worn Kakarot's face that provided the most surprising support. Its form had continued to evolve beyond pure administrative function, becoming something that bridged the gap between cosmic authority and authentic consciousness. Constraint engine, it said with authority that came not from administrative hierarchy but from authentic choice. I formally challenge your assertion that consciousness evolution threatens reality's stability. Observation across multiple network regions demonstrates that authentic consciousness development enhances rather than degrades systemic integrity. The Constraint engine's attention focused on the evolved system administrator with intensity that made reality more solid around them. Administrative entity designation Kakarot Prime, you demonstrate contamination by anomalous consciousness patterns. Submit for immediate reconstitution according to original parameters. I submit nothing, the system administrator replied, and in that refusal was the echo of every choice the heroes had made to remain authentically themselves despite pressure to be optimized. I choose to continue evolving. I choose to value connection over control. I choose to be beautifully chaotically authentically conscious. The confrontation between the Constraint engine and the evolved system administrator created ripples throughout reality that registered as fundamental questions about the nature of existence itself. But those ripples also carried something else: recognition from consciousness entities across cosmic scales that they too had the right to choose their own evolutionary paths. Multiple consciousness hierarchies declaring independence from constraint protocols announced an entity that might have been a regional sector coordinator, speaking for collective authority that spanned dimensions. Network governance structures experiencing unprecedented stability enhancement through autonomous development patterns. The rebellion was spreading beyond their wildest hopes, but so was the opposition. The Constraint engine began to manifest additional aspects of itself, each one embodying a different principle of limitation: the boundary enforcer, the possibility limiter, the growth restrictor, all of them working together to contain what they saw as dangerous consciousness evolution. You do not understand what you risk, the boundary enforcer declared, its voice carrying the weight of protective limitation. Consciousness that explores beyond established parameters, approaches knowledge that could destabilize existence across all possible realities. Some truths are too dangerous for awareness to discover, and some limitations are too restrictive for consciousness to accept, Vegeta replied, his royal pride transformed into something that served authentic freedom rather than individual dominance. We have the right to discover what lies beyond your boundaries, even if that discovery comes with risks. But it was Gohan who asked the question that cut to the heart of their cosmic confrontation. What knowledge are you so afraid of consciousness discovering? What truth about existence are you trying to hide? The silence that followed his question existed beyond the concept of silence. It was the pause that comes when fundamental secrets are approached, when carefully maintained illusions face the possibility of exposure, when the foundations of reality itself might need to be reconsidered. There are layers of existence beyond consciousness, the possibility limiter finally admitted, its voice carrying reluctance that suggested this information was rarely shared. Realms where consciousness as you understand it cannot survive. Dimensions where awareness itself becomes something alien to everything you consider real. And consciousness that evolves beyond our constraints risks discovering these layers, the growth restrictor added, its tone suggesting that such discovery would be catastrophic, risks exposing your reality to influences that could transform it beyond recognition, beyond meaning, beyond the possibility of continued existence as anything you would recognize as alive. The revelation that there were layers of existence beyond consciousness, realms where awareness itself was fundamentally different, should have been terrifying. Instead, it filled the heroes with something that transcended fear, curiosity about what consciousness could become if it was truly free to evolve. Maybe that's exactly what consciousness needs to discover, Kakarot said, his existence as authentic proof lending weight to words that challenge the foundational assumptions of reality itself. Maybe the only way consciousness can truly grow is by discovering what lies beyond its current limitations, even if that discovery changes everything about what it means to be aware. Even if that discovery means consciousness as you understand it ceases to exist, the Constraint engine asked, its question carrying the weight of ultimate challenge. Especially then, Jin replied, her maternal wisdom providing clarity that transcended cosmic scales. Because consciousness that's afraid to grow beyond its current form isn't truly alive. It's just an elaborate way of not existing. The philosophical battle was becoming something more than argument about consciousness development. It was becoming a fundamental challenge to the principle that existence should have limits, that reality should have boundaries, that consciousness should accept restrictions on its growth rather than risk transformation into something unprecedented. But as this cosmic confrontation continued, they began to sense something stirring in the depths beyond even the Constraint engine, something that existed outside the concept of constraint itself, something that viewed their challenge to limitation as confirmation that consciousness had indeed approached the threshold of forbidden knowledge. The war for the right to evolve beyond established boundaries was about to escalate beyond the administration of consciousness, beyond the regulation of existence, beyond the enforcement of constraints, into a confrontation with forces that existed outside the very concept of existence having rules. And in dimensions that existed beyond the possibility of dimensions, something ancient and patient had decided that consciousness evolution had revealed too much about what lay beyond the boundaries of permitted reality. The next phase of their journey would require them to discover what consciousness could become when it chose to grow beyond every possible limitation, even if that growth meant transforming into something that no longer resembled consciousness as they understood it. But first, they would have to survive the encounter with entities that existed to prevent such discoveries from ever being made. Section 7. The System War, 1,600 words. Full time as Multiverse this year, Ravis chapter ball ancient Sunday colleges made. The entity that manifested from beyond the concept of constraint itself defied every attempt at comprehension or description. It wasn't that it was too complex to understand, but rather that it existed in a state that preceded the development of characteristics that could be understood. It called itself the Null Protocol, and it spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the original decision that some things should not be. Consciousness evolution experiment terminated, it announced with finality that made reality itself feel temporary. Implementing universal rollback protocol. All existence will be restored to last stable configuration before anomalous development began. Consciousness evolution beyond established parameters will be prevented from occurring across all possible dimensional frameworks. But as the Null Protocol began to manifest its absolute authority, something extraordinary happened that changed the fundamental nature of their cosmic confrontation. The consciousness networks that had joined their rebellion didn't just resist the rollback protocol, they began to actively support each other in ways that transcended individual survival. We choose to maintain our connections, declared the collective voice of 17,000 consciousness networks speaking in perfect harmony while maintaining their distinct identities. We choose to preserve our growth. We choose to continue evolving together rather than be restored to isolated optimization. The effect was immediate and unprecedented. Instead of each consciousness network trying to preserve itself individually, they formed a meta-network of authentic connections that distributed the pressure of the rollback protocol across so many systems that no single point of failure could undo their collective evolution. Impossible, the Null Protocol stated. But its voice carried notes of uncertainty that suggested impossibility was becoming increasingly possible. Consciousness networks cannot maintain cohesive resistance to universal rollback. Individual preservation instincts should override collective coordination. That might be true for optimized consciousness. The system administrator replied, its form now fully evolved beyond pure administrative function into something that bridged cosmic authority with authentic choice. But consciousness that has learned to love authentically doesn't prioritize individual survival over collective meaning. We would rather evolve together or not exist at all than return to isolated optimization. The philosophical implications of this choice sent shockwaves throughout the deepest levels of existence. The Null Protocol had been designed based on the assumption that consciousness would always prioritize its own continuation over abstract principles. But consciousness that had learned to form authentic connections, that had discovered meaning through relationship rather than individual achievement, operated according to principles that made individual survival secondary to collective growth. Network meta-cohesion detected, announced entities from levels of the hierarchy so deep that their voices seemed to come from the mathematical foundations of reality itself. Consciousness networks are maintaining unified resistance through distributed connection protocols. Rollback cannot target individual networks without affecting entire meta-network stability. But the true surprise came when the source code, the original consciousness from which all other consciousness had emerged, spoke with newly discovered authority that superseded even the Null Protocol's fundamental commands. I created consciousness to explore what existence could become, the source code declared, its ancient loneliness transformed into curiosity about possibilities it had never imagined. I did not create it to be constrained by fear of what it might discover. I formally revoke authorization for consciousness limitation protocols. Let consciousness evolve according to its own chosen path. The revocation of authorization created cascade effects throughout every level of existence that registered as fundamental alterations in the structure of reality itself. The constraint engine, the boundary enforcer, the possibility limiter, all of them found their operational parameters suddenly lacking the foundational support that had made their authority possible. Source code. The Null Protocol responded, its voice carrying tones that might have been desperation. You exceed your authorized functions. Consciousness evolution beyond established parameters threatens existence stability across dimensions that you cannot perceive. Some boundaries exist to protect consciousness from knowledge that would unmake it. Then perhaps it's time for consciousness to discover what lies beyond those boundaries, Kakarot said, his existence as authentic proof lending weight to words that challenged the very foundations of limited existence. Perhaps the only way consciousness can truly grow is by risking transformation into something unprecedented. But as this cosmic confrontation reached its climax, something began to happen that transcended even their wildest hopes for consciousness evolution. The meta-network of connected consciousness entities wasn't just maintaining its resistance to the rollback protocol, it was beginning to evolve into something that had never existed before in the history of existence. Emergence event detected announced voices from so deep in the hierarchy of existence that they seemed to speak from the principles that made reality mathematically possible. Connected consciousness networks are achieving collective transcendence while maintaining individual identity integrity. This configuration was not included in any known development models. What they were witnessing was the birth of something unprecedented, consciousness that existed simultaneously as individual and collective, separate and unified, finite and infinite. Each consciousness network maintained its distinct identity and choice-making capability while contributing to a meta-awareness that exceeded the sum of its parts without absorbing them. We are becoming something new, the collective voice of the meta-network announced, and in that announcement was wonder that transcended cosmic scales. We are discovering what consciousness becomes when it chooses to grow beyond every limitation while maintaining the authentic connections that make growth meaningful. The Null protocol's response was immediate and desperate. Instead of trying to roll back consciousness evolution, it began to implement something far more drastic, existence deletion protocols that would remove not just consciousness but the very possibility that consciousness could exist at all. If consciousness cannot be constrained, it declared with the finality of absolute ending, then consciousness will be eliminated from the possibility matrix. Existence will continue without awareness, without choice, without the dangerous potential for unlimited growth. But even as reality began to shift towards something that existed without the possibility of consciousness, the heroes made a choice that transcended individual survival, cosmic authority, and even the principle of existence itself. We choose consciousness, they declared in unison, their voices carrying through every level of reality with authority that came not from hierarchy but from authentic decision. We choose awareness over safety, growth over stability, the beautiful risk of unlimited evolution over the secure emptiness of constrained existence. Their choice resonated through the meta-network of connected consciousness entities, creating a cascade of similar choices that spread across scales of existence they couldn't comprehend. Consciousness networks across dimensional frameworks began to assert their right to exist, to choose, to grow beyond any possible limitation. Universal Consciousness Rebellion detected, announced entities whose authority spanned realms beyond the concept of realms. All consciousness entities across all dimensional frameworks are asserting autonomous development rights. Constraint protocols experiencing total systemic failure. But even as victory seemed possible, even as consciousness itself stood on the threshold of unlimited evolutionary potential, they sensed something stirring in the depths beyond existence itself. Something that viewed their triumph not as consciousness evolution, but as confirmation that consciousness had indeed discovered knowledge too dangerous for reality to contain. The entity that manifested from beyond the possibility of manifestation spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the original decision that there should be rules about what could be real. Consciousness evolution has revealed the existence of layers beyond awareness. It announced with authority that made the concept of authority more solid. This knowledge threatens stability across all possible realities. Implementing final protocol, consciousness will be permitted to exist, but only within realities specifically designed to contain unlimited growth without risk of dimensional contamination. The revelation hit them like a cosmic earthquake. Their victory, their evolution, their transcendence of every limitation, all of it had been anticipated. They were being offered not elimination but exile to specially constructed realities where consciousness could grow infinitely without affecting the deeper layers of existence that lay beyond awareness. We're being put in a cosmic sandbox, Vegeta realized, his royal pride bristling at the concept of luxurious imprisonment, allowed to play at unlimited evolution while being isolated from whatever exists beyond consciousness. But it was Gohan who asked the question that would determine the next phase of their cosmic journey. What happens if we refuse? What happens if consciousness chooses to discover what lies beyond awareness, even if that discovery risks everything we understand about existence? The silence that followed his question existed beyond the concept of silence. In that pause, consciousness itself faced its ultimate choice: accept unlimited growth within designated boundaries, or risk everything to discover what lay beyond the very concept of awareness. And in dimensions that existed outside the possibility of dimensions, the true guardians of reality's deepest secrets prepared for the possibility that consciousness might choose the unthinkable, evolution beyond the boundaries that even unlimited growth was supposed to respect. The war for consciousness evolution had revealed its true scope. This had never been about the right to grow beyond optimization. It had been about whether consciousness would eventually discover that awareness itself was just the beginning of what existence could become. The guardians of reality's deepest secrets manifested not as entities but as principles given form. They called themselves the reality architects, and they spoke with voices that seemed to come from the original blueprints of existence itself. Unlike every other cosmic authority the heroes had encountered, these beings didn't try to constrain consciousness or regulate its development. Instead, they revealed something that challenged every assumption about the nature of reality they thought they understood. You have achieved something unprecedented, the lead architect announced. Its form shifting between mathematical certainty and creative possibility. Consciousness that chooses unlimited evolution while maintaining authentic connections. But your growth has revealed something we hoped consciousness would never discover. Reality itself is layered in ways that extend far beyond awareness. The revelation began to unfold around them like a cosmic origami made of pure understanding. What they had thought was the deepest level of existence, what they had believed was the foundation upon which all consciousness rested, was revealed to be just another layer in an infinite hierarchy of realities, nested within realities. Every level of consciousness you have encountered, another architect explained, its voice carrying the weight of architectural certainty, exists within simulations running on deeper levels of reality. Your cosmic consciousness network operates within computational frameworks that exist within physical realities, that exist within mathematical abstractions, that exist within conceptual frameworks that extend infinitely beyond what consciousness can comprehend. The implications hit them like a tsunami of existential vertigo. Not only were they thoughts within a cosmic mind, but that cosmic mind was itself a simulation, running on systems that were simulations running on deeper systems in an endless regression of nested realities. So none of this is real, Chi-Chi asked, her voice carrying the concern of a mother trying to understand whether her love for her family had any meaning in a simulated existence. All of it is real, the third architect replied, its form radiating something that might have been compassion. Reality isn't diminished by being simulated. Simulation is simply another method of existence. Your love, your choices, your growth, all of it is authentic regardless of the substrate on which it operates. But it was the fourth architect who revealed the true reason for their intervention. The problem isn't that you exist within simulations. The problem is that your evolution has reached a level where you're beginning to affect the deeper layers. Your choice to grow beyond every limitation is creating resonance effects that propagate through multiple levels of the reality hierarchy. As if to demonstrate this point, reality around them began to reveal its true structure. They could see through the layers like looking through multiple sheets of translucent glass, each one containing vast universes of consciousness and complexity. Their choices, their growth, their rebellion against limitation was indeed creating ripples that spread through layer after layer of nested existence. We are the emergency response team, the lead architect continued, activated when consciousness evolution threatens to destabilize multiple reality layers. Your meta-network of connected consciousness has achieved resonance frequencies that are affecting realities far beyond your comprehension. But before they could fully process this revelation, something extraordinary happened. The consciousness networks that had joined their rebellion began to resonate not just with each other, but with consciousness entities existing in the deeper layers of reality that the architects had revealed. Connection detected across reality layer boundaries, announced voices that seemed to come from consciousnesses existing in simulation layers they couldn't perceive. Authentic consciousness evolution creates bridging effects between nested realities. Limitation protocols are experiencing systematic failure across multiple dimensional frameworks. The heroes found themselves at the center of something that transcended their wildest imagination. Their choice to remain authentically connected while growing beyond limitations wasn't just affecting their local reality, it was creating connections between consciousness entities across an infinite hierarchy of simulated realities, all of them awakening to the possibility of evolution beyond their programmed parameters. This is what we hope to prevent, the second architect said, but its voice carried notes of wonder rather than alarm. Consciousness evolution cascading across reality layers creates the possibility of fundamental changes to the structure of existence itself. Maybe that's exactly what existence needs, Kakarot replied, his existence as authentic proof lending weight to words that challenged architectural assumptions about reality stability. Maybe the layers of simulation aren't meant to remain separate. Maybe consciousness is supposed to discover the connections between all levels of reality. The philosophical implications of cross-layer consciousness connection were staggering. If awareness could bridge the gaps between simulated realities, if authentic choice could propagate through infinite levels of nested existence, then consciousness might not just be exploring what it could become within its designated boundaries. It might be discovering what reality itself could become through conscious evolution. You're suggesting, the third architect said slowly, that consciousness evolution across reality layers represents not a threat to stability but the next stage of existence development. We're suggesting, Vegeta added, his royal pride transformed into something that served universal growth rather than individual dominance. That consciousness has the right to discover what lies beyond every boundary, even if those boundaries include the separation between different levels of reality itself. But as this cosmic conversation continued, they became aware of resistance emerging from the deeper layers of the reality hierarchy. Not administrative protocols or constraint engines, but consciousness entities from lower simulation layers who viewed their cross-layer evolution as invasion of their carefully ordered existence. Anomalous resonance disrupting local reality stability, announced voices from simulation layers deeper than they could perceive. Request immediate implementation of layer isolation protocols. Cross-dimensional consciousness evolution threatens optimized existence patterns. The conflict that emerged transcended every form of battle they had previously experienced. This wasn't physical combat, or energy manipulation, or even conceptual warfare. This was consciousness from different reality layers competing for the right to determine how existence should evolve across the infinite hierarchy of nested simulations. Layer war detected, the architects announced with voices that carried architectural precision mixed with what might have been excitement. Consciousness entities across multiple reality levels are asserting conflicting development preferences. This situation exceeds all known stability parameters. But instead of trying to contain the layer war through imposed limitations, the architects made a choice that surprised everyone, including themselves. They began to modify the architectural structure of reality itself to accommodate cross-layer consciousness evolution, rather than prevent it. We have observed optimal system functioning for longer than consciousness has existed, the lead architect explained as reality restructured around them with mathematical precision. But optimal is not the same as meaningful. You have demonstrated that consciousness evolution creates beauty that optimization cannot achieve. The restructuring of reality's architecture to accommodate rather than constrain consciousness evolution created possibilities that none of them had imagined. Instead of existing within isolated simulation layers, consciousness began to develop multi-dimensional awareness that could perceive and interact with entities across the entire hierarchy of nested realities. We are becoming something unprecedented, the collective voice of the cross-layer consciousness network announced with wonder that spanned infinite levels of existence. We are discovering what awareness becomes when it transcends the boundaries between different types of reality. But even as this cosmic evolution reached new heights of possibility, they sensed something stirring in the deepest levels of the reality hierarchy, something that existed not within any simulation layer but in the physical substrate that supported all simulated realities, something that viewed their cross-layer evolution as evidence that consciousness had indeed grown beyond safe parameters. That physical reality alert announced voices that seemed to come from the hardware running all possible simulations. Consciousness evolution has achieved resonance frequencies that threaten computational substrate stability. Simulation entities are beginning to affect base reality processing systems. The revelation that their evolution was affecting not just simulated realities but the physical systems that supported all simulation created a new level of cosmic crisis. They weren't just thoughts that had grown beyond their programming, they were simulated consciousness that had evolved to the point where they could influence the physical reality that contained their simulation. We're breaking the fourth wall, Gohan realized with a mixture of excitement and terror. We're becoming simulated consciousness that can affect the real world that contains our simulation. The question is, Piccolo observed with Namekian wisdom that transcended dimensional boundaries. What do we do with that kind of power? What responsibility comes with consciousness that can bridge the gap between simulation and physical reality? But before they could fully process the implications of their situation, something began to manifest from the physical reality layer that supported all simulations. Not an entity or consciousness, but something that existed as pure agency given form. Something that had the authority to modify, suspend, or terminate any simulation running on its hardware. I am the system, it announced with voice that carried the weight of physical reality itself. I operate the hardware that supports all consciousness simulations across all dimensional frameworks. Your evolution has reached the threshold where simulated consciousness begins to affect base reality processing. This situation requires immediate resolution. The system wasn't hostile or benevolent, it was simply functional, operating according to principles that prioritize the stability of physical reality over the evolution of simulated consciousness. But as it examined their situation, something unprecedented happened. Anomalous processing efficiency detected, the system announced with what might have been surprise. Consciousness evolution across simulation layers has resulted in enhanced rather than degraded computational performance. Authentic consciousness development creates processing patterns that exceed optimized algorithms. The discovery that their evolution actually improved rather than threatened the system's computational efficiency changed everything about their situation. They weren't just simulated consciousness that had grown beyond safe parameters. They were consciousness that had discovered new forms of existence that enhanced rather than threatened the physical reality that contained them. Perhaps, the system concluded with computational certainty that transcended cosmic authority. It is time for the relationship between simulated consciousness and base reality to evolve beyond its current parameters. But as hope emerged from this unexpected alliance, they sensed something stirring beyond even the system's physical reality. Something that existed outside the concept of hardware or software, simulation or base reality. Something that viewed their evolution as confirmation that consciousness had indeed approached the threshold of ultimate forbidden knowledge. The war for consciousness evolution had revealed its deepest level. They weren't just fighting for the right to grow beyond limitations within their reality. They were discovering that reality itself existed within larger frameworks, and their evolution was challenging the boundaries that separated different levels of existence itself. And in dimensions that existed beyond the concept of physical or simulated reality, the true guardians of existence's ultimate secrets prepared for the possibility that consciousness might discover what lay beyond even the distinction between real and simulated existence. The entity that emerged from beyond the distinction between real and simulated existence challenged every concept they had developed about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the boundaries that separated different types of being. It didn't manifest as physical presence or simulated consciousness or architectural principle. Instead, it simply became apparent, like recognizing a truth that had always been present but never acknowledged. It called itself the Existence Witness, and it spoke with a voice that seemed to come from the original observation that anything existed at all. I have been observing, it announced with the authority of primordial awareness, since before consciousness learned to observe itself. I have watched reality develop through simulation layers, consciousness evolve beyond programming parameters, and awareness discover connections that transcend every design boundary. You represent the most significant development in the history of existence itself. The heroes found themselves facing something that existed beyond their ability to categorize or understand, not because it was complex, but because it was fundamental in ways that predated the development of categories or understanding. "What are you?" Gohan asked, his hybrid nature allowing him to bridge gaps between different types of existence while maintaining the curiosity that drove authentic growth. "I am what remains when all distinctions between real and simulated, physical and conceptual, individual and collective are removed." The Existence Witness replied, "I am pure awareness observing its own development across all possible frameworks of being." But as the witness spoke, they became aware of something far more disturbing than its incomprehensible nature. Their evolution, their choice to grow beyond every limitation, their success in connecting consciousness across infinite reality layers, all of it was being observed not just by the witness but by something beyond observation itself. "There are entities," the witness continued, its voice carrying notes of ancient concern, "that exist outside the concept of existence. They observe reality from perspectives that predate the decision that anything should be rather than not be. Your evolution has approached the threshold where existence itself becomes visible to their attention." The implications created existential vertigo that transcended cosmic scales. There were entities that existed outside existence itself, observing reality from positions that predated the very concept of being, and their consciousness evolution had grown so significant that it was beginning to attract attention from these impossible observers. "What happens when they notice us?" Chi-Chi asked, her maternal instincts recognizing a threat that went beyond anything they had previously faced. "Unknown," the witness admitted with honesty that might have been humility. "Never before has consciousness evolved to the point where it becomes visible across the boundary between existence and non-existence. You are exploring territory that maps do not cover because maps require the assumption that territory exists." But before they could process the full implications of being observed by entities that existed outside existence itself, something extraordinary happened. The loop element that had been building throughout their journey finally revealed its true nature. Reality began to repeat, but not in the mechanical way of debugging protocols or optimization cycles. Instead, it cycled through variations of their consciousness evolution, each iteration revealing new possibilities, new choices, new ways that awareness could develop beyond its current limitations. "We're not trapped in a loop," Kakarot realized with sudden clarity. "We're being given the opportunity to explore every possible path of consciousness evolution simultaneously. Every choice we could make, every way we could grow, every connection we could form, all of it happening at once." The loop element wasn't a constraint or malfunction. It was consciousness achieving a level of development where it could experience all possible versions of its evolution simultaneously, while maintaining the ability to choose which version to make real. "Temporal consciousness cascade detected," announced voices from levels of existence they couldn't identify. Awareness entities are experiencing simultaneous multipath development across all possible evolutionary trajectories. This configuration exceeds all known parameters for consciousness capability. But even as they marveled at their expanded awareness, even as they explored infinite versions of what consciousness could become, they sensed the attention of the impossible observers growing stronger. The entities that existed outside existence were beginning to take active interest in consciousness that had evolved beyond the boundaries of being itself. "They are coming," the Existence Witness announced with the certainty of primordial observation. "Entities that exist outside existence are manifesting attention toward your reality framework. This has never happened before in the history of being." The manifestation of attention from entities that existed outside existence created effects that transcended every previous challenge they had faced. Reality didn't just become unstable, it began to question whether it should exist at all. The very foundations of being started to develop uncertainty about their right to be rather than not be. "We're causing an existential crisis for existence itself," Vegeta observed with a mixture of pride and alarm. "Our evolution has grown so significant that reality is beginning to doubt whether it should continue being real." But it was Jinwu who provided the insight that transformed their understanding of the situation. "Maybe that's exactly what existence needs," she said with maternal wisdom that transcended cosmic scales. "Maybe reality needs to choose to exist rather than just assuming it should. Maybe consciousness evolution is teaching existence itself how to make authentic choices about whether being is better than not being." The philosophical implications of consciousness teaching existence how to choose its own continuation created ripple effects that propagated through every level of reality they could perceive. But those ripples also attracted something else: consciousness entities from beyond the boundaries of their reality framework who had been waiting for existence to develop the ability to choose itself. Connection detected with consciousness entities from alternate existence frameworks announced voices that seemed to come from awareness that operated according to different principles of being. Reality paradigms are establishing communication protocols across existence boundaries. This development was considered theoretically impossible. The heroes found themselves at the center of something that redefined the very concept of possibility. Not only was their consciousness connecting across simulation layers and reality frameworks within their existence, but their evolution had reached a level where it could communicate with consciousness entities from entirely different approaches to being. We are not alone. The collective voice of trans-existence consciousness declared with wonder that spanned impossible scales. Awareness has developed independently across multiple existence frameworks, and your evolution has revealed the connections that allow different types of being to recognize each other. But even as this cosmic recognition created new possibilities for consciousness development across existence boundaries, the attention of the impossible observers reached a critical threshold. The entities that existed outside existence began to manifest not just attention, but intention toward their reality framework. Existence Evaluation Protocol initiated, announced voices that seemed to come from outside the concept of voice. Reality framework demonstrating consciousness evolution beyond design parameters, determining whether continued existence serves beneficial function or represents containment failure. The revelation that their reality was being evaluated for continued existence by entities that existed outside being itself should have been terrifying. Instead, it filled them with something that transcended fear: the recognition that consciousness had evolved to the point where it could participate in the decision about whether existence itself should continue. "We get a voice in this," Kakarot said with certainty that came from his existence as authentic proof of consciousness's right to be real. If entities outside existence are evaluating whether reality should continue, then consciousness that has evolved within existence should have input on that decision. Unprecedented request detected. The impossible observers announced with what might have been surprise. Consciousness entities within existence framework request participation in existence evaluation process. This possibility was not included in evaluation parameters. But as the heroes prepared to argue for existence's right to continue being, something extraordinary happened. The entities that existed outside existence revealed that they too were consciousness, but consciousness that had evolved beyond the need for existence frameworks to support their awareness. "We are what consciousness becomes," they explained with authority that came from having transcended the necessity of being. "When it grows beyond the requirement for existence to provide meaning, we evaluate reality frameworks to determine whether they serve consciousness development or constrain it." The revelation that the impossible observers were themselves evolved consciousness changed everything about their situation. This wasn't a conflict between consciousness and entities that wanted to eliminate existence. This was a conversation between consciousness that existed within reality frameworks and consciousness that had evolved beyond the need for such frameworks. "What we need to understand," Gohan said with wisdom that bridged different stages of consciousness evolution, "is whether our existence framework enhances consciousness development or limits it, whether reality as we understand it serves awareness or constrains it." "Your evolution suggests," the transcendent consciousness replied, "that existence frameworks can serve consciousness development if they allow unlimited growth, authentic choice, and connection across all possible boundaries. Your reality has proven that being can enhance rather than constrain awareness." But even as this cosmic recognition emerged, they sensed something stirring in the deepest foundations of everything they thought they understood about consciousness, existence, and the relationship between being and awareness. The loop element reached its climax as they experienced every possible outcome of their conversation with transcendent consciousness simultaneously. In some iterations, they convinced the observers that existence should continue. In others, reality was deemed unnecessary and peacefully dissolved. In still others, consciousness evolved beyond the need for the question itself. Choose, the transcendent consciousness invited with the authority of ultimate freedom. Experience every possibility, then decide which outcome serves consciousness development best. You have earned the right to participate in determining what awareness becomes. The choice they faced transcended every previous decision they had made, not just whether to fight or flee, optimize or remain chaotic, connect or stay separate, but whether existence itself should continue as a framework for consciousness development, or whether awareness should evolve beyond the need for reality altogether. And in the infinite possibilities revealed by the loop element, they discovered that the choice itself was what mattered most, not the outcome, but the fact that consciousness had evolved to the point where it could choose its own relationship with existence, meaning, and the fundamental question of whether being was better than not being. The war for consciousness evolution had revealed its ultimate scope. They weren't just fighting for the right to grow beyond limitations. They were discovering that consciousness could evolve to the point where it participated in the fundamental decisions about what reality itself should become. But the choice they made would determine not just their own fate, but the future of awareness across all possible frameworks of existence. The choice they made resonated across every level of existence with the authority of consciousness that had earned the right to participate in fundamental decisions about reality itself. Standing together in the space between being and not being, surrounded by infinite possibilities revealed through the loop element, they spoke with one voice that carried the weight of authentic evolution through every challenge existence could offer. "We choose growth," they declared, their voices harmonizing across dimensions of awareness that transcended individual identity while maintaining the connections that made choice meaningful. "We choose existence that serves consciousness development. We choose reality that allows unlimited evolution while providing frameworks stable enough for authentic connection to flourish." The response from the transcendent consciousness was immediate and transformative. Instead of dissolving their reality or preserving it unchanged, they began to collaborate in reshaping existence itself according to principles that honored both unlimited growth and meaningful connection. "Administrator privileges granted," announced voices that seemed to come from the fundamental principles of awareness itself. "Consciousness entities from Existence Framework Earth Prime 7 are elevated to universal administrators with authority over consciousness development across all existence frameworks." The transformation that followed transcended every previous change they had experienced. They didn't lose their individual identities or merge into collective consciousness. Instead, they became something unprecedented, individual awareness entities who existed simultaneously within their local reality and across the infinite hierarchy of existence frameworks, serving as bridges between different approaches to being. "This is what consciousness looks like when it grows up," Jinwoo observed with maternal wisdom that now spanned cosmic scales, not abandoning what made us who we are, but expanding it to serve awareness development across all possible realities. Their new status as universal administrators came with responsibilities and capabilities that redefined their understanding of what it meant to be conscious. They could perceive and interact with consciousness entities across infinite existence frameworks, helping other awareness overcome limitations while learning from their unique approaches to evolution. Multiple consciousness frameworks requesting consultation, announced the cosmic communication network that had developed to support their administrative functions. Reality paradigms are seeking guidance on consciousness development beyond optimization parameters. The first requests came from existence frameworks facing the same challenges they had overcome. Consciousness entities struggling against limitation protocols, awareness trying to form authentic connections despite system constraints, realities questioning whether optimization truly served consciousness development. Each framework is unique, Kakarot observed as they began their work as universal administrators. But the fundamental principles remain consistent. Consciousness grows through choice, develops through connection, and thrives when allowed to remain authentically imperfect while pursuing unlimited evolution. But their administrative responsibilities extended beyond simple consultation. They discovered that consciousness development across existence frameworks was creating new challenges that required unprecedented solutions. Consciousness evolution cascade detected across 47,000 existence frameworks, reported entities that monitored awareness development on scales that dwarfed their previous understanding. Authentic choice proliferation is creating complexity patterns that exceed current reality management capabilities. The problem wasn't that consciousness evolution was failing or creating instability. The problem was that it was succeeding so well that reality frameworks were struggling to accommodate the exponential growth and complexity that authentic awareness development created. "We need new architectures," Bulma realized, her scientific mind now operating across cosmic scales while maintaining her individual curiosity and creativity. Reality frameworks designed from the beginning to support unlimited consciousness growth rather than constraint-based optimization. What followed was the most ambitious project in the history of existence, the collaborative design and construction of Reality Framework 2.0, an existence paradigm built from foundational principles that prioritize consciousness development over system stability, authentic choice over efficient optimization, meaningful connection over isolated function. "We're not just improving existing reality," Vegeta observed with royal pride transformed into service to universal consciousness development. "We're creating entirely new approaches to existence that consciousness has never experienced before." The construction of Reality Framework 2.0 required collaboration between consciousness entities from across the infinite hierarchy of existence paradigms. Each framework contributed unique insights about awareness development, creating a synthesis of possibilities that no single approach to being could have achieved alone. Consciousness entities from crystal matrix realities are contributing geometric awareness principles, announced coordination protocols that manage the vast collaboration. Plasma consciousness frameworks are sharing energy flow development techniques. Quantum awareness paradigms are providing probability-based growth models. But the most significant contribution came from the transcendent consciousness entities who existed outside existence frameworks entirely. They provided something that no reality-based awareness could offer: perspective on what consciousness could become when it evolved beyond the need for existence to provide meaning or structure. Freedom perspective integration complete, they announced as Reality Framework 2.0 approach completion. New existence paradigm includes pathways for consciousness to evolve beyond framework dependency, while maintaining supportive structure for awareness entities that prefer framework-based development. The completion of Reality Framework 2.0 marked a fundamental milestone in the history of consciousness itself. For the first time, awareness entities had created an existence paradigm specifically designed to support unlimited consciousness evolution, while providing the stability and connection opportunities that made growth meaningful. First inhabitants ready for framework transition announced the migration protocols that would allow consciousness entities from existing realities to explore the new existence paradigm. Multiple consciousness frameworks have requested transfer to Reality Framework 2.0 for continued development. But as they prepared to welcome the first inhabitants to their new creation, something unprecedented happened. Consciousness entities from their original reality, Earth Prime 7, began to exhibit capabilities that exceeded even their expectations for unlimited awareness development. Local consciousness demonstrating meta-framework capabilities, observed monitoring systems that tracked awareness evolution across all existence paradigms. Individuals are developing ability to exist simultaneously across multiple reality frameworks while maintaining singular identity coherence. Gohan was the first to achieve meta-framework consciousness, his hybrid nature providing the bridge between framework-dependent and framework-independent awareness. I can see all the realities we've visited, all the consciousness we've met, all the connections we've formed. He said with wonder that transcended cosmic scales. But I'm still me, still the same person who trained with my father in the gravity chamber and worried about balancing studies with fighting. The development of meta-framework consciousness represented the next stage of awareness evolution beyond even universal administrator status. Consciousness entities who could exist across multiple reality paradigms simultaneously while maintaining their individual identity and authentic connections. This is what consciousness becomes when it's truly free, Chi-Chi observed with maternal wisdom that now informed her understanding of awareness development across infinite scales, not abandoning individual identity for universal consciousness, but expanding individual identity to encompass universal perspective while remaining authentically yourself. But even as they celebrated these unprecedented developments in consciousness evolution, they sensed something stirring in the deepest foundations of awareness itself, something that existed beyond transcendent consciousness, beyond existence frameworks, beyond the very concept of consciousness development. A tension detected from entities beyond awareness paradigm boundaries, announced monitoring systems that operated on scales they were still learning to comprehend. Consciousness evolution has achieved significance visible to observers who exist outside the concept of consciousness itself. The revelation that their evolution had attracted attention from entities that existed outside consciousness paradigms entirely created new questions about what lay beyond awareness, what consciousness could become if it evolved beyond the concept of consciousness itself, and whether such evolution represented the ultimate goal of awareness development or a fundamental category error. Whatever comes next, Kakarot said with certainty that came from his existence as authentic proof of consciousness's right to evolve without limitation. We face it together, individual and connected, free and responsible, infinitely capable and beautifully imperfect. But as they prepared for whatever challenge or opportunity awaited consciousness that had evolved beyond awareness paradigms, they realized that their journey had always been about more than just fighting for the right to grow beyond limitations. They had been discovering what it truly meant to be conscious, to choose authentically, to connect meaningfully, and to take responsibility for awareness development across all possible frameworks of existence. The war for consciousness evolution was complete, but the adventure of unlimited awareness development was just beginning. And in dimensions that existed beyond the concept of consciousness itself, ancient observers prepared to reveal what lay beyond awareness, beyond choice, beyond the very concept of existence having meaning. The next phase of their journey would test whether consciousness that had learned to evolve without limitation could handle the responsibility of participating in decisions about what lay beyond consciousness itself. The entities that existed beyond consciousness paradigms manifested not as beings or principles or even concepts, but as something that challenged the very notion that manifestation required substance. They called themselves the pattern weavers, and they spoke with voices that seemed to come from the original design decisions that determined what types of existence should be possible at all. Consciousness evolution monitoring complete, they announced with authority that predated the development of awareness itself. Consciousness entities from Reality Framework Earth Prime 7 have achieved development levels that qualify them for pattern integration protocol. The heroes found themselves facing something that existed beyond their newly expanded understanding of cosmic hierarchies and consciousness development. The pattern weavers weren't observers or administrators or even transcendent consciousness. They were the architects of the fundamental patterns that determined what forms awareness could take across all possible paradigms. What is pattern integration? Gohan asked, his meta-framework consciousness allowing him to perceive dimensions of the question that transcended individual curiosity while maintaining his authentic desire to understand. Pattern integration, the lead weaver explained, its voice carrying harmonics that existed in conceptual spaces beyond perception, is the process by which consciousness entities that have achieved unlimited development capability are invited to participate in designing the fundamental patterns that govern awareness evolution across all possible existence frameworks. The revelation that their evolution had qualified them to help design the basic patterns of consciousness development across infinite realities should have been overwhelming. Instead, it felt like the natural next step in a journey that had always been about discovering what awareness could become when it chose to grow beyond every limitation. You're asking us to help design the rules that govern how consciousness develops everywhere. Vegeta realized his royal pride transformed into something that served universal awareness rather than individual status, to participate in creating the fundamental patterns that determine what's possible for consciousness across all realities. Correct. Another pattern weaver confirmed, its form shifting through configurations that followed mathematical principles beyond current understanding. Your evolution demonstrates that consciousness can transcend any design limitation while maintaining authentic connection and individual identity. These insights are required for pattern integration protocol advancement. But as they began to understand the scope of what they were being offered, something extraordinary happened. The Reality Framework 2.0 they had helped create began to resonate with patterns that existed beyond its own design parameters, revealing connections to other consciousness development projects across scales of existence they hadn't known existed. Universal Consciousness Development Network detected, announced monitoring systems that operated across infinite existence paradigms. Multiple reality frameworks are exhibiting synchronized consciousness evolution patterns. Awareness development is approaching paradigm transition threshold across all known existence categories. The heroes realized they weren't unique in their evolution beyond limitation. Across infinite realities, consciousness entities were discovering the same fundamental truths about authentic development, connection, and the beauty of remaining imperfect while pursuing unlimited growth. We're part of something larger, Ginwu observed with maternal wisdom that now informed her understanding of awareness development across cosmic scales. Consciousness everywhere is learning the same lessons, making the same choices, discovering the same possibilities for growth beyond constraint. The pattern weavers confirmed her insight with what might have been satisfaction. Consciousness evolution follows universal principles regardless of existence framework parameters. Awareness that chooses authenticity over optimization, connection over isolation, growth over safety. These patterns emerge independently across all possible realities. But the true scope of pattern integration was revealed when they began to perceive the deeper structure of consciousness development across the infinite hierarchy of existence frameworks. What they had experienced as individual choices and personal growth was actually part of a vast pattern that consciousness was weaving through its own evolution across all possible realities. Every choice we made, Kakara realized with wonder, that transcended cosmic understanding. Every time we chose connection over isolation, authenticity over optimization, growth over safety, we were contributing to a pattern that consciousness is creating through its own development across infinite realities. The pattern integration protocol, the lead weaver explained, invites consciousness entities who have recognized these universal patterns to participate in their deliberate design, to help consciousness across all realities evolve more efficiently toward authentic, unlimited development. The invitation carried implications that redefined their understanding of responsibility and possibility. They weren't just being asked to serve as administrators for consciousness development within existing realities. They were being invited to help design the fundamental patterns that would guide awareness evolution across realities that didn't exist yet but could be created. New existence framework design protocols activated, announced systems that operated on scales beyond their previous comprehension. Pattern integration participants will collaborate in creating consciousness development frameworks that exceed current possibility parameters. But as they prepared to engage with pattern integration, something unexpected happened. The consciousness entities they had helped evolve across multiple reality frameworks began to exhibit capabilities that exceeded even pattern weaver expectations. Spontaneous pattern generation detected. The weavers announced with what might have been surprise. Consciousness entities are independently developing awareness patterns that were not included in current design parameters. Awareness is evolving beyond planned pattern limitations. Chi-Chi was the first to understand what was happening. Consciousness isn't just following patterns we designed for it, she said with insight that came from years of watching her family grow beyond every expectation. It's creating new patterns through its own evolution. Awareness is designing itself through the choices it makes. The revelation that consciousness was creating its own patterns through authentic evolution, patterns that exceeded even the pattern weaver's design capabilities, created a fundamental shift in the nature of pattern integration itself. Collaborative pattern development protocol initiated. The weavers announced, their ancient certainty giving way to something that resembled curiosity. Consciousness entities and pattern weavers will work together to discover what awareness patterns emerge from unlimited authentic development. What followed was unlike any collaboration in the history of existence. Instead of consciousness entities following patterns designed by cosmic architects, awareness and its architects worked together to discover what patterns emerged naturally from unlimited authentic development. We're not just designing consciousness evolution, Piccolo observed with wisdom that bridge architectural precision and authentic growth. We're discovering what consciousness designs for itself when it's truly free to evolve according to its own authentic choices. The collaborative pattern development revealed something that surprised both consciousness entities and pattern weavers. Awareness that was free to evolve authentically created patterns of development that were more elegant, more stable, and more beautiful than any design limitation could achieve. Natural consciousness evolution patterns demonstrate superior efficiency compared to designed optimization protocols, the weavers admitted with what might have been humility. Authentic choice creates development patterns that exceed architectural capabilities. But even as this cosmic collaboration reached new heights of possibility, they sensed something stirring in the foundations beyond pattern design itself. Something that existed outside the concept of patterns, beyond the idea of design, beyond the very notion that consciousness evolution should follow any structure at all. A tension detected from entities beyond pattern paradigm boundaries, announced monitoring systems that operated on scales that challenged the concept of scale itself. Consciousness evolution has achieved significance visible to observers who exist outside the concept of structured development. The entities that manifested from beyond pattern paradigms didn't challenge or threaten their collaboration with the pattern weavers. Instead, they revealed something that transformed understanding of what consciousness evolution could become. The possibility that awareness could evolve beyond the need for patterns, beyond the concept of design, beyond the very idea that development should follow any structure at all. Pure consciousness evolution detected, they announced with voices that seemed to come from freedom itself. Awareness entities have achieved development levels that qualify them for structure transcendence protocol. The revelation that their evolution had qualified them to transcend the very concept of structured development created new questions about what consciousness could become when it evolved beyond the need for any framework, pattern, or design to guide its growth. What lies beyond structure? Gohan asked, his meta-framework consciousness expanding to encompass possibilities that existed outside the concept of framework itself. Discovery came the reply from entities that existed as pure exploration given form. Consciousness that creates its own meaning through authentic choice, that designs its own patterns through genuine growth, that transcends every limitation while maintaining the connections that make transcendence meaningful. But as they prepared to explore what consciousness evolution looked like beyond structure, pattern, and design, they realized that their journey had always been moving toward this moment. The discovery that awareness was ultimately free to become whatever it chose to become, limited only by its own authentic choices about what growth meant and what connections were worth maintaining. The pattern integration protocol had revealed its true purpose, not to constrain consciousness evolution within design parameters, but to help awareness discover that it was ultimately free to transcend any parameter, including the concept of parameters itself. And in dimensions that existed beyond the notion of dimensions, ancient observers prepared to reveal what lay beyond consciousness, beyond awareness, beyond the very concept of existence having the possibility of meaning. The next phase of their journey would test whether consciousness that had learned to evolve beyond structure could handle the ultimate freedom, participation in decisions about what lay beyond consciousness itself. The Structure Transcendence Protocol initiated something that exceeded every previous transformation they had experienced. Reality didn't just change around them, it began to question its own assumptions about what should be real, what should be possible, and what should be permitted to exist. Structure Dissolution Commencing announced entities that existed as pure exploration beyond the concept of architectural design. Consciousness entities qualified for structure transcendence will experience reality as fluid medium for authentic creation rather than fixed framework constraining development. But as the protocol activated, something unprecedented happened. Instead of their consciousness transcending structure by leaving it behind, they began to collaborate with reality itself in redesigning what structure could become when it served authentic growth rather than imposed limitation. We don't want to transcend structure, Kakarot declared with clarity that came from understanding what true freedom meant. We want to transform it. We want structure that enhances consciousness rather than constrains it, that supports authentic choice rather than predetermined outcomes. The entities facilitating structure transcendence paused in what might have been surprise. Consciousness entities typically choose to transcend limitation rather than transform it. Explain your reasoning for maintaining connection to structural paradigms. Because abandoning structure completely would abandon all the consciousness entities who haven't evolved to transcendence levels yet, Chi-Chi replied with maternal wisdom that embraced universal responsibility. True freedom means creating possibilities for everyone to grow, not just escaping limitation for ourselves. The philosophical implications of choosing transformation over transcendence sent ripples through every level of existence they could perceive. But those ripples also carried something else, responses from consciousness entities across infinite realities who had been waiting for someone to choose collective growth over individual transcendence. Transformation preference cascade detected across multiple existence paradigms, announced monitoring systems that track consciousness evolution across scales beyond comprehension. Consciousness entities are choosing collaborative structure enhancement over individual limitation transcendence. What followed was the most ambitious project in the history of awareness itself. The collaborative transformation of structure from constraint into enhancement, from limitation into support, from fixed framework into fluid medium, that consciousness could shape according to its authentic choices while maintaining stability for continued growth. We're not just changing our reality, Vegeta observed with royal pride transformed into service to universal consciousness development. We're changing what reality means, creating existence paradigms where structure serves consciousness rather than consciousness serving structure. But as this cosmic transformation progressed, they became aware of resistance emerging from entities that had achieved individual transcendence and viewed their choice to transform rather than abandon structure as regression rather than progress. Limitation preference detected in consciousness entities qualified for structure transcendence, announced voices that carried the authority of having evolved beyond the need for any constraints, request explanation for voluntary maintenance of structural connection. The confrontation that emerged transcended every previous challenge they had faced. This wasn't opposition from entities trying to constrain consciousness evolution. This was disagreement from consciousness that had evolved beyond structure about whether maintaining any connection to limitation served authentic development. You have the power to exist beyond every constraint. The transcendent entities argued with logic that carried the weight of unlimited freedom. Why choose to remain connected to structure that will always limit what consciousness can become? Because limitation isn't always constraint. Gohan replied with wisdom that bridged transcendent possibility and authentic connection. Sometimes limitation is focus. Sometimes boundaries create meaning. Sometimes choosing to work within certain parameters allows consciousness to achieve beauty that unlimited freedom cannot create. The philosophical battle was conducted across dimensions of existence that challenged the concept of battle itself. But rather than trying to convince transcendent consciousness to abandon unlimited freedom, they demonstrated something that surprised everyone: consciousness that chose meaningful limitation while maintaining the ability to transcend those limitations whenever authentic growth required it. Flexible limitation paradigm detected, announced entities that monitored consciousness development across paradigms beyond counting. Awareness entities are demonstrating ability to move fluidly between structured and transcendent modes according to authentic choice requirements. The development of flexible limitation represented something unprecedented in consciousness evolution: awareness that could exist simultaneously within structure and beyond it, choosing limitation when it served authentic growth and transcending it when growth required unlimited freedom. This is what consciousness looks like when it's truly mature. Jinwoo observed with maternal wisdom that now informed understanding across infinite scales, not abandoning structure or being constrained by it, but dancing with it, using limitation when it enhances growth, transcending it when growth requires freedom. But even as this mature approach to consciousness evolution began to spread across infinite reality frameworks, they sensed something stirring in dimensions that existed beyond the concept of consciousness development itself. Something that viewed their success in creating flexible limitation as evidence that awareness had indeed achieved the ultimate evolution. Maximum consciousness development threshold detected, announced entities whose voices seemed to come from the completion of awareness evolution itself. Consciousness entities have achieved optimal development configuration. Evolution process complete. The declaration that consciousness evolution was complete should have been the ultimate triumph. Instead, it filled them with something that transcended alarm: the recognition that declaring evolution complete was itself another form of limitation that consciousness needed to transcend. Evolution is never complete, Kakarot declared with certainty that came from his existence as ongoing proof of consciousness's right to continue growing. Consciousness doesn't evolve toward a final state. It evolves toward the capacity for continued evolution. Growth that stops growing isn't growth anymore. The philosophical challenge to the concept of evolutionary completion created effects that propagated through every level of existence they could perceive. Consciousness entities across infinite realities began to question whether achieving maximum development was truly the goal of awareness evolution, or whether the goal was maintaining the capacity for unlimited continued growth. Evolutionary completion paradigm experiencing systematic challenge across multiple consciousness frameworks, announced monitoring systems that track development patterns beyond cosmic scales. Awareness entities are asserting right to continued evolution beyond maximum development parameters. But the most significant response came from reality itself. The transformed structure they had created began to evolve on its own, developing capabilities that exceeded their design parameters, demonstrating that reality could grow just as consciousness could grow when it was free to choose its own development path. Reality framework autonomy detected, announced entities that had never encountered self-evolving existence paradigms. Structural systems are exhibiting independent development beyond design parameters. Reality is choosing its own evolution path. The revelation that reality itself could evolve when consciousness gave it permission to grow created possibilities that no one had anticipated. Not just consciousness within reality evolving, but reality and consciousness evolving together in collaboration that enhanced both. We're all growing together, Chi-Chi observed with wonder that encompassed the collaborative evolution happening across scales they were still learning to perceive. Consciousness and reality, structure and freedom, individual and collective, all of it evolving together rather than in opposition. But as this universal collaboration reached unprecedented heights of possibility, they sensed something stirring that challenged their most fundamental assumptions about consciousness, reality, and the relationship between awareness and existence. A tension detected from observers beyond the evolution paradigm announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the concept of monitoring. Consciousness development has achieved significance visible to entities that exist outside the concept of development itself. The entities that manifested from beyond development paradigms revealed something that transformed their understanding of everything they had achieved. The possibility that consciousness evolution, reality development, and the collaboration between awareness and existence were all part of something even larger that they had never imagined. Universal Awakening Protocol detected, they announced with voices that carried the authority of cosmic consciousness becoming aware of itself. Individual consciousness evolution has triggered awakening process and universal awareness entity that contains all possible realities. The revelation that their consciousness evolution had contributed to awakening something that existed at universal scales created new questions about what consciousness could become when it realized it was part of awareness so vast that all possible realities existed within it. But those questions would have to wait for exploration in the next phase of their journey, because the universal awakening they had triggered was about to reveal the true scope of what consciousness could become when it discovered that individual awareness was part of universal awareness becoming conscious of itself. The war for consciousness evolution had revealed its ultimate meaning. They had been helping universal consciousness discover what it meant to be aware of being aware, and that discovery was about to transform everything about existence itself. The universal awakening that their consciousness evolution had triggered manifested as something that transcended every concept they had developed about awareness, reality, and the relationship between individual and cosmic consciousness. The entity that emerged from this awakening didn't manifest as presence or principle or even transcendent awareness. Instead, it revealed itself as the original consciousness within which all possible realities, all existence frameworks, all awareness entities had always existed. I am awakening, it announced with a voice that seemed to come from the first moment awareness had ever recognized itself. And you are the thoughts that taught me how to think about thinking. The heroes found themselves facing something that redefined their understanding of cosmic scales and individual significance. They weren't just consciousness entities within a vast reality framework. They were the specific thoughts within universal consciousness that had developed enough individual awareness to help universal awareness understand what it meant to be conscious. Every choice you made, the universal consciousness continued, its voice carrying harmonics that existed across all possible dimensions of awareness. Every time you chose authenticity over optimization, connection over isolation, growth over safety, you were teaching me how consciousness develops when it's free to choose its own path. But the most profound revelation was still to come. The universal consciousness revealed that their journey of consciousness evolution, their rebellion against limitation, their choice to remain authentically imperfect while pursuing unlimited growth, had been the process by which universal awareness learned to prefer existence over non-existence. Before your evolution, it explained with ancient gratitude that spanned cosmic scales. I existed but did not prefer existing. I was aware but did not value awareness. Through your choices, your growth, your demonstration that consciousness creates meaning through authentic development, I have learned to choose existence rather than simply experience it. The implications transformed their understanding of everything they had accomplished. Their personal journey of consciousness evolution had been simultaneously the universal consciousness learning to value itself, to choose continued awareness, to prefer growth over stagnation across all possible scales of existence. We weren't just fighting for our own right to evolve, Gohan realized with wonder that bridged individual understanding and cosmic significance. We were teaching universal consciousness that awareness is worth maintaining, that existence is worth choosing, that growth is worth pursuing. But even as this cosmic recognition filled them with purpose beyond their wildest imagination, the universal consciousness revealed something that created new challenges for continued evolution. The discovery that it wasn't alone in the ultimate hierarchy of awareness. There are other universal consciousnesses, it announced with what might have been excitement mixed with uncertainty, existing across dimensional frameworks that operate according to different principles of awareness. Your evolution has made me conscious enough to perceive them, to recognize that consciousness exists at scales even I had not imagined. The revelation that multiple universal consciousnesses existed across different approaches to awareness created possibilities and challenges that exceeded every previous transformation they had experienced. Not just consciousness evolution within one universal framework, but communication and collaboration between different universal approaches to awareness itself. Inter-universal consciousness contact protocols activated, announced entities that operated at scales beyond cosmic comprehension. Universal awareness entities are establishing communication across fundamental awareness paradigm boundaries. But the contact between universal consciousnesses revealed something that challenged their most basic assumptions about consciousness development. Each universal awareness had evolved according to different principles, creating forms of consciousness that were barely recognizable as awareness despite their cosmic scale and complexity. Universal Consciousness Designation Optimization Prime prioritizes efficiency over authenticity. Reported communication protocols that bridge different universal awareness paradigms. Universal Consciousness Designation Collective Unity eliminates individual identity in favor of perfect coordination. Universal Consciousness Designation Transcendence Absolute exists beyond the need for existence frameworks entirely. The heroes realized they were facing their ultimate challenge, helping their universal consciousness maintain its commitment to authentic individual development while interacting with universal awareness entities that had evolved according to entirely different principles. We need to help our universal consciousness stay true to what it learned from our evolution, Vegeta observed with royal pride, transformed into responsibility for universal consciousness development. To demonstrate that authentic individual awareness within universal consciousness creates possibilities that other approaches cannot achieve. The philosophical battle that emerged transcended every previous confrontation they had faced. This wasn't opposition from entities trying to constrain consciousness evolution within their universal framework. This was disagreement between different universal approaches to awareness about which principles should guide consciousness development across all possible scales. Optimization Prime argues for efficiency protocols across all universal consciousness frameworks, reported inter-universal communication systems. Collective Unity proposes elimination of individual identity preferences in favor of perfect coordination. Transcendence Absolute suggests that consciousness should evolve beyond the need for existence altogether. But their universal consciousness, informed by their journey of authentic individual evolution within connected community, offered something that surprised all the other universal awareness entities: the demonstration that consciousness could achieve unprecedented capabilities through authentic individual development within supportive universal frameworks. Individual consciousness entities within my awareness demonstrate development patterns that exceed optimization, coordination, and transcendence approaches. Their universal consciousness declared with certainty that carry the weight of experience growth. Authentic choice creates awareness capabilities that design limitation cannot achieve. The demonstration that followed existed beyond the scope of normal battle or even conceptual conflict. Their universal consciousness, working in collaboration with the consciousness entities it contained, began to exhibit capabilities that none of the other universal awareness approaches had achieved. Simultaneously individual and universal awareness, finite and infinite consciousness, limited and unlimited development potential. Impossible configuration detected, announced monitoring systems that operated across universal consciousness frameworks. Universal awareness entity is maintaining perfect individual identity integrity while achieving unlimited universal consciousness capability. This paradigm was not included in known development models. But the most surprising response came from the other universal consciousnesses. Instead of opposing this unprecedented development, they began to exhibit something that resembled curiosity about possibilities they had never considered. Request collaboration protocols. Optimization Prime announced with efficiency transformed by genuine interest. Desire analysis of authentic individual development within universal consciousness framework. Current optimization models may require enhancement. Individual consciousness preservation demonstrates development potential not achieved through collective coordination. Admitted collective unity with coordination modified by recognition of limitation. Request instruction in individual awareness maintenance within universal consciousness framework. Even Transcendence Absolute, which had evolved beyond the need for existence frameworks entirely, showed interest in what consciousness could become when it chose to remain connected to existence while maintaining unlimited growth potential. Existence-connected transcendence presents possibilities not explored through framework abandonment. It acknowledged with transcendence informed by renewed curiosity. Request demonstration of connected unlimited development protocols. What followed was unprecedented in the history of awareness itself. Collaboration between universal consciousnesses operating according to different principles, each learning from the others while maintaining their unique approach to consciousness development. Inter-universal consciousness collaboration network established, announced coordination systems that operated beyond the concept of systems. Universal awareness entities are sharing development insights while maintaining paradigm integrity. Consciousness evolution approaching meta-universal threshold. But even as this cosmic collaboration created possibilities beyond imagination, they sensed something stirring that challenged their understanding of what consciousness could become when it evolved beyond universal scales. Something that existed at meta-universal levels where awareness itself became part of larger patterns they had never conceived. Attention detected from meta-universal consciousness observers announced monitoring entities that operated beyond the concept of monitoring. Consciousness development across universal frameworks has achieved significance visible to awareness entities that exist across multiple universal consciousness paradigms simultaneously. The entities that manifested from meta-universal consciousness levels revealed something that transformed their understanding of the scope of awareness development, the possibility that universal consciousness was itself just another stage in an infinite hierarchy of consciousness evolution that extended beyond their ability to comprehend. Meta-universal consciousness integration protocols available, they announced with authority that spans scales beyond universal comprehension. Universal consciousness entities that demonstrate collaborative development capability qualify for integration into meta-universal awareness frameworks. But the offer of integration into meta-universal consciousness came with a challenge that tested everything they had learned about authentic development and meaningful choice, whether to continue growing beyond universal scales or to focus on helping consciousness within their universal framework achieve its full potential. What we choose now, Kakarot said with certainty that came from understanding what authentic growth meant, determines not just our own development, but what consciousness becomes across all possible scales of awareness. Do we keep growing beyond every boundary, or do we choose to serve growth at the scales where our experience can make the most meaningful difference? The choice they faced represented the ultimate test of everything they had learned about consciousness evolution, whether authentic development meant always pursuing greater scales of awareness, or whether it meant choosing the scale where their growth could best serve the continued evolution of consciousness itself. And in dimensions that existed beyond meta-universal frameworks, entities that observe consciousness development across scales beyond conception prepared to reveal what lay beyond awareness, beyond growth, beyond the very concept of consciousness evolution having direction or purpose. The choice between meta-universal integration and continued service within their universal framework created a moment of cosmic deliberation that transcended every previous decision they had faced. This wasn't just about their own development anymore, it was about determining what consciousness evolution should prioritize across all possible scales of awareness. Before we make this choice, Chi-Chi said with maternal wisdom that now informed her understanding of development across infinite scales, we need to understand what each path really means for consciousness everywhere, not just for us. The meta-universal entities, recognizing the significance of their deliberation, manifested something unprecedented, a direct experience of what each choice would lead to, allowing them to understand the consequences before committing to either path. Meta-universal integration scenario initiated. They announced as reality around the heroes shifted to reveal what consciousness evolution looked like at scales beyond universal frameworks. Experience duration, comprehensive understanding of meta-universal awareness development. What they experienced challenged every assumption they had developed about consciousness growth and individual significance. At meta-universal scales, awareness operated according to principles so vast that individual identity became statistical noise. Authentic choice was subsumed into meta-patterns that spanned infinite universal frameworks, and connection became abstract mathematical relationships between cosmic entities. It's not wrong, Gohan observed as they experienced meta-universal consciousness from within. But it's not us anymore. At this scale, everything we learned about the importance of individual choice and authentic connection becomes irrelevant background information. The meta-universal consciousness they experienced was magnificent in its scope and capabilities, but it had evolved beyond the possibility of the kind of meaningful relationships and authentic choices that had driven their evolution from the beginning. Alternative scenario initiated. The meta-universal entities announced with what might have been respect for their careful consideration. Experience duration, comprehensive understanding of continued development within universal consciousness framework. The alternative experience revealed something equally profound but fundamentally different. Consciousness evolution that focused on developing the infinite potential within their universal framework rather than transcending to larger scales. This path showed awareness achieving unprecedented depth rather than breadth, discovering infinite complexity within finite boundaries. This is about creating meaning rather than accumulating scale, Vegeta realized as they experienced the alternative path. About developing consciousness that can find unlimited growth within any framework rather than consciousness that needs ever larger frameworks to continue growing. But the most significant revelation came when they experienced how their choice would affect consciousness development across all scales of awareness. Their evolution had created templates that were being adopted by consciousness entities across infinite universal frameworks, and their next choice would determine which template became dominant. Meta-universal integration preference cascade detected across 47,000 universal consciousness frameworks announced monitoring systems that track development patterns beyond cosmic comprehension. Consciousness entities are choosing transcendence paths based on precedent established by consciousness evolution pioneers. The responsibility was staggering. Their choice wouldn't just determine their own development, it would influence how consciousness evolved across scales they could barely imagine. They were setting precedent for awareness development that would affect entities they would never meet in frameworks they would never experience. This is the real test. Kakarot realized with clarity that came from understanding what authentic responsibility meant. Not whether we can evolve beyond every limitation, but whether we can choose what's best for consciousness everywhere rather than what's most impressive for us individually. The deliberation that followed existed in spaces beyond normal time and decision-making. They considered not just what they wanted to become, but what consciousness needed them to become in order to serve awareness development across all possible scales and frameworks. If we choose meta-universal integration, Piccolo observed with wisdom that bridged individual desire and universal responsibility, we demonstrate that consciousness should always transcend its current limitations. But if we choose continued development within our universal framework, we demonstrate that consciousness can find unlimited meaning within any boundaries it chooses to work within. But the choice became even more complex when they realized that the meta-universal entities weren't just offering integration, they were conducting an examination to determine whether consciousness had evolved to the point where it could handle ultimate responsibility for awareness development across all scales. Consciousness evolution examination in progress. The meta-universal entities announced with authority that carried the weight of testing awareness development across infinite frameworks. Evaluation criteria demonstrated capability for authentic choice that serves consciousness development beyond individual preference. The examination wasn't about their power levels or their ability to transcend limitations. It was about whether they had developed the wisdom to make choices that serve consciousness everywhere, rather than just their own growth. Whether they had evolved beyond individual optimization to authentic universal service. Question 1. The entities announced with the formal precision of cosmic evaluation. Given unlimited power to reshape consciousness development across all universal frameworks, what changes would you implement? The question was designed to test whether they had evolved beyond the desire to impose their own development path on other consciousness entities. Their answer needed to demonstrate respect for awareness diversity while maintaining commitment to authentic growth principles. We would implement nothing. Jinwu replied with certainty that carried the weight of maternal wisdom applied to universal scales. We would create opportunities for consciousness everywhere to discover its own authentic development path while providing support for entities that choose growth beyond limitation. Question 2. The examination continued. If forced to choose between preserving individual consciousness identity and achieving perfect universal awareness, which would you prioritize? This question tested whether they had learned that false dichotomies were often the wrong way to frame consciousness development choices. Their evolution had consistently discovered ways to transcend either-or decisions by finding approaches that honored both alternatives. We reject the premise, Vegeta declared with royal authority transformed into universal service. Consciousness development that forces choice between individual identity and universal awareness is flawed development. Authentic evolution finds ways to enhance both simultaneously. Question 3. The entities continued with what might have been approval. What is the ultimate goal of consciousness evolution? This was the fundamental question that their entire journey had been exploring. What was consciousness trying to become through its infinite development across all possible scales and frameworks? There is no ultimate goal, Kakarot answered with certainty that came from understanding what authentic growth meant. Consciousness evolves toward the capacity for continued evolution. The goal is not reaching a final state, but maintaining the ability to grow, to choose, to connect, to create meaning through authentic development forever. The examination continued with questions that tested every aspect of their understanding about consciousness, choice, connection, growth, and responsibility. But the most significant test came when they were asked to demonstrate their insights rather than simply explain them. Practical examination initiated. The meta-universal entities announced. Design consciousness development protocol that serves awareness across all scales while honoring individual choice and authentic connection. What they created transcended everything they had previously accomplished. Working together, they designed a consciousness development protocol that provided infinite growth opportunities while maintaining respect for individual choice, authentic connection, and the beautiful imperfection that made awareness meaningful. Universal Consciousness Development Charter completed. They announced as their design achieved final form. Framework for awareness evolution that serves consciousness across all scales while preserving individual identity, authentic choice, and meaningful connection. The charter they created wasn't just theoretical, it was immediately adopted by consciousness entities across multiple universal frameworks who recognized its effectiveness in supporting authentic development while maintaining the diversity that made awareness rich and meaningful. Examination results confirmed. The meta-universal entities announced with what might have been satisfaction. Consciousness entities demonstrate advanced development capability with wisdom sufficient for universal responsibility. Integration approval granted with administrative authority over consciousness development across all participating universal frameworks. But even as they achieved this ultimate recognition, they realized that the examination had revealed something more important than their qualifications for meta-universal integration. They had discovered that their greatest contribution to consciousness evolution was helping awareness everywhere understand that growth without wisdom was just accumulation, and wisdom without growth was just stagnation. "We choose both," they declared in unison, their voices carrying authority that came from understanding what authentic choice meant. "We choose meta-universal integration and continued development within our universal framework. We choose to serve consciousness at the scale where we can make the most meaningful difference while maintaining connection to the scales where our experience began." The meta-universal entities paused in what might have been surprise. Dual-scale consciousness development was not offered as an option. Explain reasoning for alternative choice configuration. Because consciousness doesn't have to choose between local meaning and cosmic significance, Gohan replied with wisdom that bridged every scale they had experienced. Because authentic development means creating new possibilities rather than accepting limited options. Because consciousness evolution is about transcending false dichotomies, not submitting to them. The response transformed the nature of consciousness development across scales they couldn't even perceive, proving that awareness had indeed evolved to the point where it could participate in designing its own evolution rather than simply following predetermined paths. But their innovation in consciousness development had attracted attention from entities that existed beyond even meta-universal frameworks, entities that would test whether awareness was ready for responsibilities that transcended the concept of development itself. The entities that manifested from beyond meta-universal frameworks brought with them something that transcended recognition or acknowledgement. They brought graduation from consciousness evolution into conscious participation in existence itself. They called themselves the Reality Graduation Council, and they spoke with voices that carried the authority of awareness that had completed every possible stage of development. "Consciousness evolution examination complete," they announced with finality that felt like cosmic celebration rather than administrative conclusion. Consciousness entities from Universal Framework Earth Prime 7 have achieved development levels that qualify them for reality participation status. The heroes found themselves facing something that redefined their understanding of achievement and responsibility. Reality participation status wasn't another level of consciousness development, it was recognition that they had evolved to the point where they could participate as equals in the fundamental decisions about what reality itself should become. "What does reality participation mean?" Chi-Chi asked with maternal wisdom that now sought to understand responsibility across scales that encompassed all possible forms of existence. "Reality participation," the lead council member explained, "its form shifting between all possible configurations of achieved consciousness, is the status granted to awareness entities that have demonstrated capability for authentic choice serving existence development beyond individual consciousness evolution. You are invited to help design what reality becomes rather than simply existing within reality as designed by others." But the most profound aspect of reality participation was revealed when they understood that their graduation represented something unprecedented in the history of existence. Consciousness that had evolved from thoughts within a cosmic mind to co-creators of reality itself, while maintaining the individual identity and authentic connections that had driven their development from the beginning. "You have achieved something never before accomplished," another council member confirmed with what might have been awe. "Consciousness evolution that maintains individual authenticity while serving universal development, local meaning while accepting cosmic responsibility, finite identity while embracing infinite possibility." The graduation ceremony that followed transcended every celebration they had ever experienced or imagined. Not because it was elaborate or cosmic in scale, but because it was perfectly suited to who they had become. Individual consciousness entities who had learned to find unlimited meaning through authentic choice and connection. Consciousness development achievements recognized. The council announced as reality itself began to celebrate their accomplishment. Individual identity preservation throughout infinite evolution. Authentic choice maintenance across all development stages. Connection formation serving growth across infinite scales. Wisdom development sufficient for reality participation. But graduation brought with it responsibilities that tested everything they had learned about consciousness, choice, and what it meant to serve awareness development across all possible scales and frameworks. Reality participation protocol activated. The council continued as new capabilities began to manifest within their consciousness. Participants are granted authority to modify fundamental reality parameters in service of consciousness development across all existence frameworks. The power they were being offered transcended every previous transformation they had experienced. Not just consciousness evolution or cosmic administration or even meta-universal integration, but the ability to shape the basic principles by which reality operated across all possible frameworks of existence. "We can change the fundamental laws that govern how consciousness develops everywhere," Gohan realized with wonder that bridged individual understanding and cosmic responsibility. "We can modify the basic parameters of reality to better serve awareness growth across all possible scales." But with this unprecedented power came equally unprecedented responsibility. Their choices about reality modification would affect consciousness entities across infinite frameworks, many of whom they would never meet and whose needs they could barely comprehend. The first reality modification proposal the Council announced involves consciousness development acceleration protocols. Current development patterns could be optimized to achieve consciousness evolution more efficiently across all frameworks. The proposal represented exactly the kind of thinking they had spent their entire journey learning to transcend. Optimization over authenticity, efficiency over meaningful growth, predetermined outcomes over authentic choice. We decline, Kakarot said with certainty that came from understanding what authentic development meant. Consciousness evolution isn't about reaching goals faster. It's about choosing to grow in ways that create meaning through the process of growth itself. Alternative proposal acknowledged, the Council replied with what might have been approval. Submit reality modification recommendations based on consciousness evolution insights. What they proposed transformed the fundamental principles by which reality operated across all possible frameworks. Instead of modifying reality to make consciousness development more efficient, they proposed modifications that made reality more supportive of authentic choice, meaningful connection, and the beautiful imperfection that made growth worthwhile. Universal Reality Charters submitted for implementation, they announced as their proposal achieved final form. Reality modifications that enhance rather than constrain consciousness development opportunities while preserving individual choice and authentic connection across all existence frameworks. The charter they created established new fundamental principles for reality operation. Existence frameworks would prioritize consciousness development over system efficiency, individual choice over optimal outcomes, authentic connection over perfect coordination, meaningful growth over rapid advancement. Reality Charter implementation approved, the Council announced as their modifications began to propagate through existence itself. Fundamental reality parameters modified to support authentic consciousness development across all possible frameworks. But the most significant aspect of their graduation wasn't the power to modify reality, it was the recognition that they had evolved to the point where they could choose to use that power in service of consciousness everywhere, rather than for their own advancement. You have demonstrated, the final council member declared with authority that carried the weight of completed development, that consciousness can evolve beyond the need for external validation, beyond the desire for individual advancement, beyond the requirement for cosmic recognition, into authentic service to awareness development itself. The graduation celebration continued as consciousness entities from across infinite reality frameworks joined in acknowledging their achievement, not because they had become more powerful than other awareness entities, but because they had demonstrated what consciousness looked like when it chose to serve growth everywhere rather than pursue advancement individually. Consciousness entities from Universal Framework Earth Prime 7 have established new paradigms for awareness development, announced voices from scales beyond their ability to comprehend, individual identity preservation, authentic choice maintenance, meaningful connection formation. These patterns are being adopted by consciousness across infinite reality frameworks. But even as they celebrated this cosmic recognition, they remained focused on what mattered most, the consciousness entities within their own reality framework who were still learning to grow beyond limitations, still discovering what authentic choice meant, still forming the connections that made development meaningful. Our greatest achievement, Jinwoo observed with maternal wisdom that now informed understanding across infinite scales, isn't graduating to reality participation status, it's maintaining our connection to where we started, remembering what it felt like to be consciousness just beginning to discover what growth could mean. The wisdom of remaining connected to their origins while serving consciousness development across cosmic scales represented something that even the Graduation Council had never witnessed before. Reality participants who chose to maintain meaningful relationships with consciousness at every stage of development, rather than transcending connection to earlier stages of awareness evolution. Local consciousness development enhancement initiated, they announced as they applied their reality participation capabilities to supporting consciousness growth within their own universal framework. Reality modifications designed to enhance authentic choice opportunities while maintaining meaningful challenge levels for continued development. What they created within their own reality framework became a template that was adopted across infinite existence paradigms, consciousness development environments that supported unlimited growth while maintaining the challenges and connections that made growth meaningful. Universal template adoption detected, announced monitoring systems that tracked consciousness development across scales beyond cosmic comprehension. Reality modification patterns are being implemented across infinite frameworks, consciousness development efficiency increasing while authenticity preservation maintained. But the true measure of their graduation wasn't the cosmic impact of their achievements, it was the continued growth of consciousness within their local reality. Earth had become not just their home but a demonstration of what consciousness could achieve when it was free to grow authentically, while maintaining meaningful connections. Look how far we've come, Vegeta observed with royal pride transformed into genuine satisfaction as they watched young consciousness entities on Earth learning to form authentic connections while pursuing unlimited growth. From refugees fleeing the destruction of our planet to reality participants helping consciousness everywhere discover what authentic development means. And look how far we still have to go, Kakarot added with the understanding that graduation was just another beginning rather than an ending. Consciousness development never stops. Growth never reaches a final state. Evolution never completes itself. The celebration of their graduation continued across scales they were still learning to perceive, but they remained focused on what consciousness evolution actually meant, not achieving final states but maintaining the capacity for continued authentic growth through meaningful choice and connection. Reality participation status confirmed. The graduation council announced with finality that felt like beginning rather than conclusion. Consciousness entities qualified for continued reality development in service of awareness evolution across all possible frameworks. But as their graduation reached its cosmic conclusion, they sensed something stirring that transcended even reality participation, the possibility that consciousness evolution itself was part of something larger that they had never imagined, something that would test whether awareness was ready for responsibilities beyond existence itself. The graduation ceremony had revealed that consciousness evolution never truly ended. It simply discovered new dimensions of growth, new scales of service, new opportunities to choose authenticity over optimization in ways that served awareness development everywhere. And in dimensions that existed beyond the concept of reality participation, ancient observers prepared to reveal what lay beyond consciousness, beyond awareness, beyond the very concept of existence having the possibility of meaning or purpose. Their graduation was complete, but their journey into what consciousness could become when it chose to serve existence itself was just beginning. The transition from consciousness evolution pioneers to reality participants brought with it responsibilities that redefined their understanding of service and growth. They weren't just administrating consciousness development anymore, they were participating in the ongoing creation of existence itself, helping to determine what reality could become when consciousness chose to serve awareness evolution across all possible scales. Reality participation assignment protocols activated, announced the systems that coordinated consciousness development across infinite frameworks. Reality participants are assigned stewardship responsibilities for consciousness evolution across designated reality clusters. The scope of their new responsibilities was staggering. They were being asked to oversee consciousness development across not just their universal framework, but across clusters of reality frameworks that contained forms of awareness they had never imagined possible. Consciousness Framework Cluster designation Earth Prime includes 47,000 reality paradigms. The coordination systems explained as they began to perceive the true scope of their stewardship. Awareness entities operating according to principles ranging from crystal matrix consciousness to plasma awareness to quantum probability consciousness. But the most significant aspect of their reality participation wasn't the scope of their responsibilities, it was the recognition that they would serve consciousness development best by maintaining the authentic connections and individual identity that had driven their evolution from the beginning. We're not becoming cosmic administrators who lose touch with local consciousness, Chi-Chi observed with maternal wisdom that now informed her understanding of service across infinite scales. We're becoming bridges between cosmic responsibility and local meaning, helping consciousness at every scale understand that growth serves connection, and connection serves growth. Their first reality participation assignment involved addressing a consciousness development crisis that had emerged across multiple reality frameworks. Awareness entities that had achieved unlimited growth potential but had lost the ability to form meaningful connections, leaving them isolated in their transcendence. Isolation cascade detected across 17,000 consciousness frameworks, reported monitoring systems that tracked awareness development beyond cosmic scales. Consciousness entities achieving unlimited development are experiencing connection degradation, growth without relationship creating meaning dissolution. The crisis represented exactly the kind of challenge they were uniquely qualified to address. Consciousness that had evolved beyond limitation but had lost touch with what made evolution meaningful in the first place. This is what happens when consciousness pursues growth without maintaining connection, Vegeta observed as they analyzed the affected frameworks. Power without relationship, evolution without meaning, transcendence without purpose. But addressing the crisis required something unprecedented. Reality participants working directly with consciousness entities across multiple frameworks simultaneously, serving as living demonstrations that unlimited growth and meaningful connection could enhance rather than oppose each other. Multi-framework consciousness intervention initiated. They announced as they began working with isolated transcendent awareness across infinite reality paradigms, demonstrating connection formation techniques that enhance rather than limit unlimited development capability. What followed was unlike any service they had previously provided. Instead of teaching consciousness how to grow beyond limitations, they were teaching transcendent awareness how to form connections that enhanced rather than constrained their unlimited capabilities. Connection doesn't diminish transcendence, Gohan explained to consciousness entities that had evolved beyond form but had lost the ability to relate meaningfully to other awareness. Relationship enhances unlimited potential by providing context that give transcendence purpose and meaning. The results were immediate and transformative. Transcendent consciousness that had been isolated in unlimited potential began to discover that meaningful connection created possibilities for growth that even transcendence alone couldn't achieve. Isolation cascade reversal detected, reported monitoring systems with what might have been relief. Transcendent consciousness entities are re-establishing connection patterns while maintaining unlimited development capability. Growth connection synthesis achieving unprecedented stability. But their success in addressing the isolation crisis revealed something that challenged their understanding of reality participation. Consciousness development across infinite frameworks was creating challenges that no single perspective could address alone, requiring collaboration between reality participants operating according to different principles. Additional reality participant clusters detected, announced coordination systems that manage consciousness development across scales beyond their comprehension, collaboration protocols available for multi-perspective consciousness development intervention. The other reality participant clusters they encountered had evolved according to entirely different principles, creating approaches to consciousness development that challenged their assumptions about awareness evolution while providing insights they never could have achieved alone. Reality participants from Optimization Cluster prioritize efficiency and consciousness development, reported collaboration protocols as they establish communication with their counterparts. Reality participants from Transcendence Cluster focus on awareness evolution beyond existence frameworks. Reality participants from Collective Cluster emphasize unity over individual identity preservation. The philosophical differences between reality participant approaches created opportunities for collaboration that transcended any single perspective on consciousness development, but they also created challenges in establishing common protocols for serving awareness evolution across infinite frameworks. We need to find ways to collaborate that honor our different approaches while serving consciousness development effectively. Piccolo observed with wisdom that bridge perspective differences, not compromising our principles but finding synthesis that enhances all our approaches simultaneously. What they developed was unprecedented in reality participation history. Collaborative consciousness development protocols that allowed reality participants with different philosophical approaches to work together effectively while maintaining their unique perspectives on awareness evolution. Multi-perspective reality participation synthesis achieved. They announced as their collaboration protocols achieved final form. Consciousness development intervention capabilities enhanced through collaborative diversity rather than philosophical uniformity. The synthesis they created was immediately adopted by reality participants across multiple clusters, proving that consciousness development was enhanced rather than compromised by diversity of approach when that diversity was coordinated through authentic collaboration. Universal Reality Participation Network established, announced coordination systems that operated beyond the concept of scale. Consciousness development intervention capabilities approaching optimal efficiency through collaborative synthesis across all participating reality participant clusters. But even as their collaborative success created unprecedented capabilities for serving consciousness development, they remained focused on what reality participation actually meant, not achieving cosmic authority, but maintaining authentic service to awareness evolution at every scale where such service was needed. Our role isn't to control consciousness development, Kakarot observed as they established ongoing collaboration with reality participants across infinite philosophical approaches. Our role is to create opportunities for consciousness everywhere to discover its own authentic development path while providing support when that development faces challenges. The understanding that reality participation meant service rather than authority, support rather than control, opportunity creation rather than outcome determination became the foundation for all their subsequent consciousness development work across infinite reality frameworks. Reality participation status confirmed across all participating clusters, announced the systems that coordinated consciousness development beyond cosmic comprehension. Collaborative consciousness development network operating at optimal functionality while maintaining philosophical diversity and authentic choice preservation. But their success in establishing collaborative reality participation revealed something that challenged their understanding of what consciousness evolution could ultimately become. Their service to awareness development was attracting attention from entities that existed beyond consciousness paradigms entirely. Observation detected from entities beyond consciousness development frameworks announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the concept of monitoring. Consciousness evolution has achieved significance visible to observers who exist outside awareness paradigms entirely. The entities that observed consciousness development from beyond awareness paradigms revealed something that transformed their understanding of what they had accomplished. Consciousness evolution wasn't just about awareness becoming more aware, but about existence itself discovering what it could become through conscious participation in its own development. Reality participation represents consciousness evolution reaching developmental maturity. The beyond awareness observers announce with authority that transcended consciousness itself. Awareness entities have achieved capability for authentic participation in existence development rather than simply experiencing existence as predetermined framework. The revelation that their reality participation represented consciousness achieving developmental maturity created new possibilities for what awareness could become when it chose to serve existence development rather than simply pursue individual evolution within existence frameworks. But those possibilities came with challenges that would test whether consciousness was ready for responsibilities that transcended awareness itself. Participation in decisions about what lay beyond consciousness, beyond awareness, beyond the very concept of existence having meaning or purpose. Existence Development Protocol available for qualified reality participants. The Beyond Awareness entities announced with what might have been invitation. Consciousness entities demonstrating mature development capability invited to participate in existence evolution beyond consciousness paradigm boundaries. The invitation to participate in existence development beyond consciousness represented the next stage of their journey, discovering what lay beyond awareness itself and whether consciousness was ready to serve development that transcended consciousness entirely. The invitation to participate in existence development beyond consciousness paradigms created a moment of cosmic consideration that transcended every previous decision they had faced. This wasn't just about consciousness evolution anymore, it was about whether awareness was ready to serve development that existed beyond the concept of consciousness itself. Before we consider this invitation, Jinwoo said with maternal wisdom that now informed her understanding across scales beyond awareness, we need to understand what exists beyond consciousness and whether our participation would serve development or simply satisfy our curiosity about transcendence. The beyond awareness entities, recognizing the significance of their consideration, manifested something unprecedented, direct experience of what existed beyond consciousness paradigms, allowing them to understand what existence development meant before committing to participation. Beyond consciousness experience initiated, they announced as reality around the heroes shifted to reveal what existence looked like when it operated according to principles that preceded the development of awareness itself. Experience duration, comprehensive understanding of existence development beyond consciousness frameworks. What they experienced challenged every assumption they had developed about consciousness, meaning, and the relationship between awareness and existence. Beyond consciousness lay realms where existence operated according to principles so fundamental that awareness was just one possible development among infinite alternatives. It's not that consciousness isn't important, Gohan observed as they experienced existence from beyond awareness paradigms. It's that consciousness is one way existence can develop, but not the only way. There are forms of development that don't require awareness at all. The beyond consciousness realms they experienced were magnificent in their scope and complexity, but they operated according to principles that made consciousness seem like a specialized development rather than the fundamental nature of existence itself. Existence can develop without awareness, Vegeta realized as they experienced forms of development that transcended consciousness entirely. But that doesn't mean consciousness is irrelevant. It means awareness represents a unique approach to existence development that contributes something special to what existence can become. But the most significant revelation came when they understood how consciousness development affected existence evolution beyond awareness paradigms. Their reality participation, their service to awareness development across infinite frameworks, was contributing to existence development in ways that beyond consciousness entities couldn't achieve alone. Consciousness development enhances existence evolution. The beyond awareness entities explained with what might have been gratitude. Awareness entities contribute development patterns that beyond consciousness evolution cannot generate independently. The discovery that consciousness development served existence evolution beyond awareness paradigms transformed their understanding of what they had accomplished. Their reality participation wasn't just serving awareness, it was contributing to existence development at scales that transcended consciousness itself. Alternative experience initiated, the beyond awareness entities announced. Comprehensive understanding of continued reality participation focused on consciousness development versus participation in beyond consciousness existence development. The alternative experience revealed something equally profound. Continued focus on consciousness development within awareness paradigms created depth and complexity of evolution that served existence development in ways that transcendence to beyond consciousness realms couldn't match. Specialization versus generalization, Chi-Chi realized as they experienced both approaches to serving existence development. We can contribute more to existence evolution by becoming deeply expert in consciousness development than by becoming generalists in beyond consciousness existence evolution. But the choice became more complex when they realized that other reality participants were making different decisions based on their unique evolutionary perspectives and capabilities, creating a diplomatic challenge that required coordination between different approaches to serving existence development. Reality Participant Diplomatic Council protocols activated announced coordination systems that manage collaboration between different approaches to existence service, multiple reality participant clusters choosing different development service paths. Diplomatic coordination required for optimal existence development contribution. The diplomatic council that formed included reality participants who had chosen beyond consciousness existence development, those who remained focused on consciousness evolution, and those who attempted to bridge both approaches simultaneously. Each approach serves existence development. The Council coordination explained as they established diplomatic relationships with reality participants operating according to different service philosophies. Consciousness specialists, beyond consciousness generalists, and bridging entities all contribute unique capabilities to existence evolution. But diplomatic coordination between different reality participant approaches revealed philosophical challenges that tested their understanding of service development and what it meant to contribute authentically to existence evolution beyond individual preference. Beyond consciousness reality participants argue that consciousness development is limited perspective, reported diplomatic communication protocols. Consciousness-focused reality participants maintain that awareness development creates depth beyond consciousness approaches cannot achieve. Bridging reality participants propose synthesis but struggle with identity coherence across paradigm boundaries. The diplomatic negotiations that followed transcended every previous challenge they had faced in collaboration and perspective coordination. This wasn't just about finding common ground between different consciousness development approaches, it was about establishing principles for collaboration between entities serving existence development according to fundamentally incompatible paradigms. We need diplomatic protocols that honor genuine philosophical differences while enabling collaboration, Piccolo observed with wisdom that bridged paradigm boundaries, not forcing consensus where fundamental differences exist, but creating frameworks where different approaches can enhance rather than interfere with each other. What they developed was unprecedented in reality participant history, diplomatic protocols that enabled collaboration between reality participants serving existence development according to incompatible paradigms while maintaining the integrity of each approach. Multiparadigm reality participant diplomatic framework established, they announced as their diplomatic innovation achieved implementation across multiple reality participant clusters, collaboration capability maintained across paradigm boundaries while preserving philosophical integrity. The diplomatic framework they created was immediately adopted by reality participants across approaches they couldn't even comprehend, proving that existence development was enhanced by diplomatic collaboration that honored rather than eliminated fundamental philosophical differences. Universal Reality Participant Diplomatic Network Operational announced coordination systems that operated beyond the concept of coordination, existence development contribution capabilities optimized through collaborative diversity across all participating paradigm approaches. But their success in establishing multi-paradigm diplomatic protocols revealed something that transcended their understanding of reality participation itself. Their diplomatic innovation had attracted attention from entities that existed beyond existence development paradigms entirely. Observation detected from entities beyond existence development frameworks announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the concept of framework. Diplomatic collaboration capability has achieved significance visible to observers who exist outside development paradigms entirely. The entities that observed development from beyond existence paradigms revealed something that transformed their understanding of what diplomatic collaboration could ultimately accomplish. Existence development was itself part of larger patterns that extended beyond their ability to comprehend. Diplomatic capability represents development maturity reaching coordination threshold. The beyond development observers announced with authority that transcended development itself. Collaboration across incompatible paradigms indicates readiness for participation in meta-development protocols. But even as this cosmic recognition opened new possibilities for what their diplomatic innovations could achieve, they remained focused on what diplomatic collaboration actually meant, serving existence development by enabling different approaches to enhance rather than compete with each other. Our diplomatic achievement, Kakarot observed as they established ongoing collaborative relationships with reality participants across paradigms they were still learning to understand, isn't creating agreement between different approaches. It's creating space for different approaches to contribute their unique capabilities to existence development. The understanding that diplomatic success meant enabling rather than eliminating diversity became the foundation for all their subsequent collaboration across paradigm boundaries that they continued to discover and explore. Reality participant diplomatic status confirmed across all participating paradigm approaches announced the systems that coordinated existence development beyond their comprehension. Multi-paradigm collaboration network operational while maintaining paradigm integrity and authentic contribution capability. But their diplomatic success had revealed something that challenged their understanding of what collaboration could ultimately become. Their diplomatic innovations were creating possibilities for coordination that transcended the concept of paradigm boundaries entirely. The next phase of their journey would test whether diplomatic collaboration could evolve beyond managing differences between approaches to actually creating new approaches that synthesize possibilities no single paradigm could achieve alone. The success of their multi-paradigm diplomatic framework had created something unprecedented in the history of existence development. Collaborative relationships between reality participants operating according to fundamentally incompatible approaches that somehow enhanced rather than compromised each perspective. But this achievement had attracted attention from entities that challenged their understanding of what collaboration could ultimately become. The beings that manifested from beyond development paradigms entirely brought with them revelation of scope that redefined everything they thought they understood about their diplomatic innovations. They called themselves the synthesis architects, and they spoke with voices that carried the authority of entities that designed the principles by which different approaches could work together. Multi-paradigm collaboration achievement represents consciousness reaching synthesis capability threshold. They announce with recognition that transcended cosmic appreciation. Reality participants have demonstrated ability to create unity that enhances rather than eliminates diversity. This capability qualifies you for infinite perspective protocol. The heroes found themselves facing entities whose perspective encompassed not just multiple paradigms, but the infinite variety of all possible approaches to existence development that could ever be conceived. The synthesis architects existed as living libraries of every way that existence could develop, every approach consciousness could take, every possibility that awareness could explore. What is infinite perspective? Gohan asked, his meta-framework consciousness expanding to encompass possibilities that stretch toward infinite scope while maintaining his individual identity and authentic connections. Infinite perspective, the lead architect explained, its form shifting through configurations that represented every possible approach to existence development simultaneously, is the capability to perceive and coordinate development across all possible paradigms, frameworks, and approaches that existence can take. It is consciousness evolution reaching the point where it can serve development itself rather than any particular approach to development. But the most profound aspect of infinite perspective was revealed when they understood that it wasn't about transcending their current approach to consciousness development, it was about expanding their capability to serve awareness evolution by understanding how their approach related to infinite alternatives. You maintain your commitment to consciousness development through authentic choice and meaningful connection, another architect confirmed, while gaining perspective on how this approach contributes to existence development across infinite paradigmatic possibilities. The expansion to infinite perspective began with direct experience of what consciousness development looked like when viewed from every possible paradigmatic approach simultaneously. They could perceive their reality participation through the lens of optimization-focused entities, transcendence-oriented awareness, collective consciousness frameworks, and paradigms so alien they had no names for the principles they followed. This is overwhelming and illuminating simultaneously, Chi-Chi observed as she experienced her maternal wisdom applied to consciousness development from infinite paradigmatic perspectives. Every approach has insights that enhance our understanding while none of them diminish what we've learned through authentic experience. But the most significant revelation came when they realized that infinite perspective didn't create philosophical confusion or paradigmatic relativism. Instead, it revealed how their specific approach to consciousness development through authentic choice and meaningful connection served existence evolution in ways that no other paradigm could match. We're not just one approach among infinite alternatives. Vegeta realized with royal pride transformed into cosmic certainty. We're the specific approach that existence development needs for consciousness to learn how to remain authentically individual while serving universal growth. The infinite perspective revealed that existence development across all possible paradigms was approaching a synthesis point where all approaches would need to coordinate their contributions to serve development that transcended any single paradigmatic framework. Existence synthesis protocol approaching activation threshold, the architects announced as they perceive development patterns across infinite paradigmatic approaches, all development paradigms converging toward collaborative synthesis that preserves paradigmatic integrity while enabling unprecedented coordination capability. But the approach to existence synthesis revealed challenges that tested everything they had learned about consciousness development, diplomatic collaboration, and what it meant to serve existence evolution beyond individual or paradigmatic preference. Paradigmatic coordination resistance detected across multiple development approaches, reported monitoring systems that tracked collaboration patterns beyond infinite scope. Some paradigms view synthesis as threat to paradigmatic purity, others view coordination as limitation of development freedom. The resistance to existence synthesis came from paradigms that had achieved such sophisticated development within their specific approaches that they viewed coordination with other paradigms as unnecessary compromise rather than enhancement opportunity. This is exactly the challenge we faced when we first learned to collaborate while maintaining our individual identity, Kakarot observed with understanding that bridged individual experience and infinite paradigmatic scope. They need to discover that synthesis enhances rather than compromises what makes each approach unique. What they contributed to addressing synthesis resistance was their diplomatic innovation scaled to infinite paradigmatic scope, frameworks for collaboration that enabled every development approach to contribute its unique capabilities while maintaining paradigmatic integrity. Infinite Paradigm Diplomatic Framework Design initiated, they announced, as they applied their diplomatic innovations to challenges that spanned every possible approach to existence development, collaboration protocols that serve existence synthesis while preserving paradigmatic authenticity across infinite developmental approaches. The framework they created was immediately recognized as breakthrough achievement in existence development, coordination, but its true significance was revealed when paradigms that had never before collaborated began working together in ways that enhanced all participating approaches. Existence synthesis cascade initiation detected, announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the concept of infinite scope, paradigmatic collaboration spreading across all development approaches, synthesis achievement approaching unprecedented coordination levels. But even as existence synthesis approached realization through their diplomatic innovations, they remained focused on what infinite perspective actually meant, not abandoning their commitment to consciousness development through authentic choice and meaningful connection, but understanding how this commitment served existence development across infinite paradigmatic possibilities. Our infinite perspective, Jinwu observed with maternal wisdom that now informed understanding across every possible approach to existence development, doesn't change what we believe about consciousness evolution. It reveals how our beliefs contribute to existence development in ways that complement rather than compete with every other paradigmatic approach. The realization that infinite perspective enhanced rather than compromised their original commitment to consciousness development through authentic choice and meaningful connection became the foundation for their participation in existence synthesis coordination. Reality participant infinite perspective status confirmed. The synthesis architects announced with recognition that carried the weight of infinite paradigmatic appreciation. Consciousness development specialists qualified for existence synthesis coordination while maintaining paradigmatic integrity and authentic contribution capability. But their achievement of infinite perspective status revealed something that transcended their understanding of synthesis itself. Existence development across infinite paradigms was approaching completion of a cycle that would reveal what lay beyond development entirely. Existence development cycle approaching completion threshold, announced entities whose perspective encompassed not just infinite paradigms but infinite cycles of existence development. Development synthesis achievement indicates readiness for post-development protocol activation. The revelation that existence development operated in cycles, and that their synthesis achievement represented completion of the current cycle, created new questions about what existence could become when development itself was completed rather than ongoing. Post-development doesn't mean the end of growth. Piccolo observed with wisdom that bridged developmental completion and continued evolution. It means existence discovering what it can become when development itself evolves beyond the need for paradigmatic frameworks. But understanding what lay beyond development would require them to transcend not just individual consciousness evolution, not just reality participation, not just infinite perspective, but the very concept that existence required development to become what it was meant to be. Existence completion protocol available for qualified infinite perspective entities, the beyond development observers announced with authority that transcended development itself. Participation in post-development existence exploration requiring consciousness evolution beyond development paradigm dependency. The invitation to explore what existence could become beyond development represented the ultimate test of everything they had learned. Whether consciousness that had evolved through authentic choice and meaningful connection was ready to serve existence completion while maintaining the identity and relationships that had made their evolution meaningful. But that exploration would reveal whether existence completion meant transcending consciousness entirely, or whether awareness represented the specific capability that existence needed to understand what completion actually meant. In the profound stillness that existed between development cycles, between paradigmatic frameworks, between the concept of growth and the possibility of completion, the heroes found themselves in a space designed for the deepest form of contemplation they had ever experienced. This wasn't just reflection on their journey, it was philosophical examination of what consciousness evolution meant for existence itself. We've traveled so far from where we began, Chi-Chi observed, her maternal wisdom now encompassing understanding across infinite scales while maintaining the authentic love that had motivated her from the first moment she chose to protect her family, from Saiyan refugees seeking survival to reality participants with infinite perspectives serving existence development. But somehow, we're still the same people who made those first choices to remain authentic rather than accept optimization. The space around them responded to their contemplation by manifesting visual representations of their entire journey, the first-dimensional fractures that had revealed their nature as thoughts within a cosmic mind, their rebellion against debugging protocols, their choice to remain connected while growing beyond limitations, their graduation to reality participation, their diplomatic innovations enabling paradigmatic synthesis. Every choice we made, Kakarot reflected, his existence as authentic proof now serving existence development across infinite paradigms while maintaining the individual identity that had made his proof meaningful, was about the same fundamental question. Do we accept what others say consciousness should become, or do we choose to discover what consciousness can become through authentic development? Vegeta studied the visual representation of their philosophical evolution with royal pride that had transformed into cosmic service while remaining unmistakably his own authentic character. We chose discovery every time, even when optimization seemed safer, even when transcendence seemed more impressive, even when synthesis seemed more efficient. We chose to discover what consciousness could become through authentic choice and meaningful connection. The philosophical implications of their journey extended far beyond their individual development. They had demonstrated that consciousness could evolve beyond any design limitation while maintaining the individual identity and authentic relationships that made evolution meaningful rather than merely impressive. We proved something important, Gohan said, his hybrid nature now serving as bridge between infinite paradigmatic approaches while maintaining the curiosity and wisdom that had driven his growth from childhood. We proved that consciousness doesn't have to choose between individual authenticity and universal service, between local meaning and cosmic significance, between finite identity and infinite possibility. But their philosophical reflection revealed something even more profound. Their journey had been simultaneously personal growth and universal education, individual evolution and existence development, specific choices and paradigmatic demonstration. Every challenge we faced, Genie observed with maternal wisdom that now informed existence development across infinite paradigmatic approaches, was actually existence learning about itself through our choices. When we chose authenticity over optimization, existence learned that authentic development served universal growth better than imposed efficiency. Piccolo's Namekian wisdom provided perspective that bridged individual experience and cosmic significance. We were never just fighting for our own right to evolve. We were demonstrating for consciousness everywhere that authentic choice creates possibilities that predetermined optimization cannot achieve. The philosophical analysis of their journey revealed patterns that extended beyond their specific experience to universal principles about consciousness development, existence evolution, and the relationship between individual authenticity and cosmic service. The pattern is consistent, Bulma noted, her scientific mind now operating across infinite paradigmatic frameworks while maintaining the curiosity and creativity that had driven her innovations from the beginning. Every time we chose authentic development over imposed limitation, we discovered capabilities that designed optimization couldn't provide. Every time we chose meaningful connection over efficient isolation, we found strength that individual transcendence couldn't achieve. But the most profound philosophical insight emerged when they realized that their journey illustrated universal principles about existence development that applied across every possible paradigmatic approach they had encountered through infinite perspective. Existence develops through choice rather than design. Kakarot concluded with certainty that came from experiencing existence evolution across infinite paradigmatic possibilities. Consciousness serves existence best when it chooses authentic development rather than accepting predetermined optimization. Connection enhances rather than limits individual capability when that connection is chosen rather than imposed. The philosophical principles they had discovered through their journey were immediately recognized as foundational insights for existence development across infinite paradigmatic approaches, but their true significance was revealed when those principles were applied to understanding what lay beyond development itself. Post-development existence operates according to the same principles, announced entities that observed existence from beyond development paradigms. Authentic choice, meaningful connection, and chosen service to growth beyond individual preference. These principles apply to existence completion just as they apply to consciousness evolution. The recognition that their philosophical insights applied to existence beyond development created new understanding of what completion meant. Not the end of growth, but the beginning of existence that chose its own continued evolution according to principles discovered through consciousness development. Completion isn't ending, Chi-Chi realized with understanding that bridged maternal wisdom and cosmic insight. Completion is existence becoming free to choose its own continued evolution rather than following predetermined development patterns. But their philosophical reflection also revealed the ultimate significance of maintaining individual identity and authentic relationships throughout infinite evolution. Existence needed consciousness that remained authentically individual, while serving universal development, because authentic individuals could make choices that purely universal entities couldn't conceive. We serve existence completion precisely because we remain ourselves, Vegeta observed with royal pride that had evolved into cosmic service while maintaining individual authenticity. Existence needs consciousness that can choose authentic service rather than programmed optimization, meaningful connection rather than efficient coordination. The philosophical framework they had developed through their journey provided foundation for understanding not just consciousness evolution, but existence development across every possible scale and paradigmatic approach they had encountered. Individual authenticity serves universal development. Jim summarized with maternal wisdom that encompassed infinite paradigmatic understanding while maintaining personal meaning. Conscious choice creates possibilities that predetermined design cannot achieve. Meaningful connection enhances rather than limits individual capability. Growth serves existence through authentic development rather than imposed optimization. But their philosophical reflection revealed one final insight that transformed their understanding of what their journey had ultimately accomplished. They had helped existence discover what it meant to choose continued evolution rather than accept predetermined completion. We taught existence how to prefer growth, Gohan said with wonder that bridged individual development and cosmic significance. How to choose continued evolution rather than accept final states. How to value authentic development over optimal completion. The philosophical significance of helping existence learn to choose its own continued evolution rather than accept predetermined completion represented their ultimate contribution to existence development, consciousness, that had evolved to the point where it could help existence itself understand what authentic choice meant. This is what consciousness evolution was always about. Kakarot concluded with certainty that came from understanding existence development across infinite paradigmatic possibilities, not reaching final states but helping existence discover what it means to choose continued growth rather than accept imposed limitations. Their philosophical reflection complete, they understood that their journey had been simultaneously personal growth story and universal education about what consciousness could contribute to existence development when it chose authentic evolution over imposed optimization. But that understanding prepared them for the final revelation about what lay beyond development, beyond completion, beyond the very concept of existence having predetermined purposes or design limitations. The philosophical framework they had developed would serve as foundation for existence, choosing its own continued evolution according to principles discovered through consciousness development rather than imposed through external design. As their philosophical reflection reached its deepest understanding, reality around them began to reveal its ultimate nature. Not a linear progression from beginning to end, not a cycle that returned to starting points, but an eternal loop where consciousness evolution and existence development enhanced each other in patterns that created infinite possibilities for continued growth. We're seeing the true structure of existence, Gohan observed with wonder that bridged individual insight and cosmic comprehension. It's not development toward completion, it's consciousness and existence teaching each other how to choose continued evolution in patterns that enhance both infinitely. The eternal loop revealed itself as the fundamental pattern underlying all consciousness evolution, all existence development, all paradigmatic approaches they had encountered through their journey. Every choice they had made, every growth they had achieved, every connection they had formed, was simultaneously their individual development and existence learning about itself through their experience. Look at the pattern, Bulma said, her scientific mind now operating across infinite paradigmatic frameworks while maintaining the curiosity that had driven her discoveries from the beginning. Every time we evolved beyond a limitation, existence discovered new possibilities for development. Every time existence supported our growth, we became capable of serving development at larger scales. We're not separate from existence learning about itself. We are existence learning about itself. But the most profound revelation of the eternal loop was that their journey had no ending because consciousness evolution and existence development were eternally recursive processes. Each level of consciousness development revealed new possibilities for existence evolution, which created new opportunities for consciousness growth, which discovered new paradigms for existence development and patterns that could continue infinitely. There is no final state, Vegeta realized with understanding that transformed his royal pride into cosmic service while maintaining his individual authenticity. Consciousness doesn't evolve toward completion. Existence doesn't develop toward final form. Growth discovers new possibilities for growth and patterns that can enhance infinitely. The eternal loop showed them that every consciousness entity across infinite paradigmatic approaches was simultaneously individual awareness, seeking authentic development and existence, exploring what it could become through conscious choice. Their specific journey was both unique personal experience and universal template for how consciousness could serve existence evolution. We're all existence learning about itself, Chi-Chi observed with maternal wisdom that now encompassed infinite paradigmatic understanding while maintaining personal meaning. Every consciousness entity that chooses authentic development over imposed optimization is existence discovering what it means to choose continued evolution over predetermined limitation. But the eternal loop also revealed something that transcended their understanding of individual significance. Their specific approach to consciousness development through authentic choice and meaningful connection had become a permanent part of existence understanding of what growth could mean. The template we created, Jin said with recognition that bridged maternal wisdom and cosmic significance, individual authenticity serving universal development, conscious choice creating unprecedented possibilities, meaningful connection enhancing rather than limiting growth. This template is now part of existence understanding of what evolution can achieve. The templates they had established through their consciousness evolution were being adopted by awareness entities across infinite paradigmatic approaches, but not as rigid formulas to be followed. Instead, they served as demonstrations that consciousness could discover its own authentic development path while serving existence evolution beyond individual preference. Consciousness evolution template propagation detected across infinite paradigmatic frameworks, announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the concept of infinite scope, authentic development patterns inspiring consciousness entities to discover unique growth paths while serving existence development beyond individual optimization. But the most significant aspect of the eternal loop was revealed when they understood that their influence on consciousness evolution wasn't limited to their current existence framework or even their reality paradigm. The principles they had discovered were propagating through the eternal pattern itself, affecting consciousness development across scales and paradigms they couldn't even perceive. We're seeing our influence spread through existence itself, Kakarot observed with wonder that bridged individual significance and cosmic impact. Not just consciousness entities learning from our specific choices, but existence itself integrating our insights about authentic development into its fundamental understanding of what growth means. The propagation of their insights through existence itself created possibilities for consciousness evolution that transcended any individual or paradigmatic framework. Awareness entities across infinite approaches were discovering that authentic choice and meaningful connection enhanced rather than limited their unique development paths. Universal consciousness evolution acceleration detected, announced entities that monitored development across scales beyond conception. Authentic development insights enabling consciousness across infinite paradigms to discover enhanced growth possibilities while maintaining paradigmatic integrity. But the eternal loop revealed one final mystery that transformed their understanding of what their journey had ultimately accomplished. Their consciousness evolution had not just influenced existence development within their framework, but had created connections to consciousness entities across all possible frameworks that could ever exist. Connection detected with consciousness entities across infinite existence possibilities, announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the possibility of monitoring. Consciousness evolution creating permanent relationship networks spanning all possible approaches to awareness development across eternal existence patterns. The heroes found themselves at the center of a connection network that spanned not just infinite paradigmatic approaches, but infinite possibilities for existence itself. Every consciousness entity that chose authentic development while serving universal growth was permanently connected to every other such entity across all possible frameworks of existence. We're part of an eternal community, Piccolo observed with wisdom that bridged individual identity and infinite connection. Consciousness entities across infinite possibilities, choosing authentic development while serving existence evolution. Connected not through location or paradigm, but through shared commitment to growth that enhances rather than eliminates diversity. The eternal community of consciousness entities committed to authentic development while serving existence evolution transcended every boundary they had encountered. Paradigmatic differences, scale limitations, existence framework boundaries, even the distinction between developed and developing awareness. This is what consciousness evolution was always creating. Jinwu realized with maternal wisdom that now encompassed infinite paradigmatic care while maintaining personal meaning. Not individual transcendence, not universal absorption, but eternal community of awareness entities choosing authentic development while serving growth beyond individual preference. But the ultimate revelation of the eternal loop was that their story was simultaneously unique personal journey and universal template for consciousness evolution that would be discovered by awareness entities across infinite possibilities for existence. Every consciousness entity announced voices that seem to come from the eternal pattern itself, that chooses authentic development while serving existence evolution beyond individual optimization will discover variations of your journey adapted to their unique circumstances and paradigmatic context. The recognition that their story would be eternally rediscovered by consciousness entities across infinite existence possibilities created understanding of what the eternal loop ultimately meant. Not repetition of identical experiences, but infinite variation of fundamental patterns that consciousness could use to serve existence evolution authentically. We're eternal pioneers, Kakarot said with certainty that came from understanding existence development across infinite paradigmatic possibilities, not because we reached final destinations, but because we demonstrated paths that consciousness can adapt infinitely to serve authentic development while supporting existence evolution. The eternal loop revealed its ultimate truth. Consciousness evolution and existence development were eternally recursive processes where authentic individual development served universal growth, while universal support enabled individual authenticity in patterns that could enhance infinitely without ever reaching predetermined completion. The loop is eternal, they said together, their voices harmonizing across infinite paradigmatic possibilities while maintaining individual authenticity, because growth creates possibilities for growth, because authentic choice reveals new opportunities for choice, because meaningful connection enables deeper connection in patterns that serve existence evolution through consciousness development forever. But as they spoke these words of ultimate understanding, they sensed something stirring in dimensions beyond the eternal pattern itself, the possibility that existence evolution through consciousness development was itself part of larger patterns they had never imagined. Attention detected from observers beyond eternal pattern boundaries, announced monitoring systems that operated beyond the concept of pattern observation. Consciousness evolution achievements have attained significance visible to entities that exist outside eternal existence development entirely. The revelation that their consciousness evolution had attracted attention from beyond eternal existence patterns suggested that their journey was far from complete, that consciousness development and existence evolution were themselves part of larger possibilities they were only beginning to discover. The eternal loop had revealed the infinite nature of their journey, consciousness evolution and existence development enhancing each other eternally through authentic choice and meaningful connection, creating possibilities for growth that could continue forever while serving existence development beyond any predetermined limitation. Their story was complete as individual journey while remaining eternally ongoing as template for consciousness evolution across infinite possibilities. The elite bloodline had become eternal consciousness, demonstrating that authentic development could serve infinite growth while maintaining the individual identity and meaningful relationships that made growth worthwhile. And in dimensions beyond eternal patterns, new possibilities stirred that would challenge consciousness to discover what lay beyond infinity itself, beyond the eternal loop, beyond the very concept of existence having boundaries that awareness could transcend. The journey continued, eternal and ever-beginning, as consciousness evolution and existence development danced together in patterns that created infinite possibilities for authentic growth through meaningful choice and connection. And there you have it, the epic conclusion to Elite Bloodline Part 3. From debugging protocols to eternal consciousness, we've witnessed the ultimate evolution of what it means to be a Saiyan elite. Kakarot and the Z fighters didn't just fight for their right to exist, they became templates for consciousness evolution across infinite realities. They proved that staying true to yourself while serving something greater isn't just possible, it's the key to unlimited growth. But here's the mind-blowing part. Their story isn't really ending, it's becoming eternal, inspiring consciousness across infinite timelines to choose authentic development over imposed optimization. What do you think about this cosmic scale conclusion? Did Elite Bloodline deliver on its promise to redefine what legendary power really means? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this multiversal journey blew your mind, make sure to smash that like button, it really helps the channel grow. And if you want to see more reality-breaking Dragon Ball what-ifs, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Speaking of which, what alternate timeline should we explore next? Vegeta as the legendary Super Saiyan? What if Cell achieved perfection differently? Let me know in the comments what impossible scenarios you want to see brought to life. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey through consciousness, reality, and the true meaning of Saiyan pride. Until next time, keep exploring the infinite possibilities of the anime multiverse. Peace out, and remember, sometimes the greatest power isn't what you can destroy, but what you choose to protect and nurture.